The meeting starts now, please. Right, thank you. Before I start the business of the meeting, members, it's with sadness that I report that Councillor Bernard Hent, one of our members, sadly passed away last week. He was a valued member of this committee, and as a sign of respect, I think that I would like to start with a minute's silence, please. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, members. Before I start the business of the meeting, I will go to each member of the committee to confirm that they can hear and be heard. It is a legal requirement for me to do so. Would you please advise me at once if at any time during the meeting you experience any technical difficulties that prevent you from hearing or being heard. I remind members of the committee that you will only be allowed to or able to vote on the application before the committee if you have been present for the whole of the presentation and discussion of the application. I will now call each councillor's name in turn. Please speak to confirm that you are able to hear me, and I will confirm in response that I can hear you. Councillor Graham Andrews. Not present yet. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Good morning, Chair. I can hear you loud and clear.
I can hear and see you. Good morning. Councillor Polly Andrews.
Good morning. I can both hear and see you.
Good morning. I can hear and see you. Councillor Fagan.
Morning, Chair. I can hear and see you.
I can also hear and see you. Councillor Foxton.
Good morning, Chair. I can hear and see you.
Morning. I can hear and see you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear you.
I can also see and hear you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. I can see and hear you.
I can also see and hear you. Councillor Milmore.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, I can see and hear you.
Good morning. I can also see and hear you. Councillor Rowan.
Yeah, morning, Chair, morning, colleagues. I can see and hear you. Thank you.
Good morning to you. I can see and hear you. Councillor Selden.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. I can see and hear you.
I can also see and hear you. Councillor Stone.
Good morning, Chairman. I can see and hear you.
I can also see and hear you. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. I can hear and see you.
I can also see and hear you. Has Councillor Graham Andrews joined us yet? No. We await Councillor Andrews to join us.
Chair, I just want to say that I can hear and see you too. It's Councillor Milne here.
Sorry.
You omitted me. It's Councillor Milne. You omitted me. I just wanted to.
I'm very sorry.
Not to worry.
My apologies. I can see and hear you, Councillor Milne. Before I invite Mr. Bishop to introduce all the officers, I'm going to request that the public speaker for item 6 is attending as a virtual attendee. Mr. Beddoes is admitted to the meeting. Is he with us yet, Jen? Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Beddoes. Welcome you to the meeting this morning, and I will call upon you in due course to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. Are you able to see and hear us okay?
Hi, yes, I've just been admitted to the call and I can see and hear you.
Lovely, thank you. Welcome you to the meeting this morning, and I will call upon you in due course to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. Not too sure what's happening there, Jen. I'm getting feedback of what I've already said.
Hi, yes, I've just been.
Mr.
Sounds like the YouTube feed, Chairman.
Thing was not muted.
Oh, right. Okay. Right, I'll call upon Mr. Bishop to introduce officers, please. You're muted, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Chairman, my name is Kevin Bishop, Lead Development Manager for Planning Services. Can I introduce the three items which will be considered by yourselves today? They will all be presented by Carl Brace this morning. So that's item number 6, land at Maryvale, Ross on Wye. Item number 7, the old Hopyard, Bleethwood, Ludlow. And item number 8, land off Mill Lane, Colwell. Also in attendance, we have the legal advisor to the committee, Dawn Evans, Highways Manager, Mark Lewis, and the governance team of Tim Brown and Jennifer Priest. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I would like to welcome everybody to today's meeting. The council is video and audio streaming this meeting live on the internet and making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available on the council's website. Please note that it is a legal requirement that every member attending virtual meetings is able to hear and, where practicable, see and be heard, and where practicable, be seen by the other members in attendance and the public watching. So I ask that you please have your audio switched on, and where you are able to do so, that you also have your video switched on. Please remember that what you say and do in this meeting has a global reach, and your words and actions should be chosen carefully. And I also remind members to ensure that they are wearing their headsets while listening and speaking during the meeting. This will ensure that the audio quality is of the highest possible quality and background noise is significantly reduced. There are some additional points for members and officers to be aware of. As part of our meeting etiquette and in line with our normal committee practices, all microphones apart from mine will be placed on mute at the start of the meeting. I will run through the agenda in the customary way. When you wish to speak, please use your hand button against your name in the participants list, which should be on the right of your screens. I will then invite you to speak. You may then unmute your microphone. Please do not raise your physical hand, as I do not want to miss anyone who may wish to speak. Please note that the chat facility has been switched off to ensure that members' contributions can be offered through the spoken voice and for the public record. Please ensure that all mobile devices are switched off to prevent interference with the audio and video system. Electronic voting will be used in this meeting. You will be asked to use the electronic polls to vote to confirm the minutes and agree recommendations. When the poll appears on the screen, please select an option and press submit. If the poll does not appear on your screen, please access the poll icon at the foot of your screen in Zoom. If you're unable to vote, please raise your virtual hand. If for any reason an electronic poll cannot be undertaken, or if the outcome is unclear, then I will ask each committee member in turn to confirm their vote verbally. I request that other attendees to avoid interacting with the system during the vote and to only close off any polling screens once the vote has been confirmed by Democratic Services. Members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. the public speaking arrangements. Please note that as part of a virtual meeting format, those registered to speak in accordance with public speaking procedure, namely parish council, objectors and supporters, are able to participate in the following ways: by making a written submission, by submitting an audio recording, by submitting a video recording, or speaking as a virtual attendee. I will deal with these formats in the following way. For statements received by email, that statement will be read out by Mr. Brown. For statements received by audio or video, the recording will be played live for the meeting. For virtual attending members of the public, I will invite them to speak in turn via the audio video live during the meeting. Right, we move on to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. We have no apologies for absence. Item 2 on the agenda, name substitutes. Obviously, we have no name substitutes. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask if any members have declaration of interest on any of the items on the agenda this morning? I see none. We move on to item 4, minutes of the last meeting, to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting. We have no matters of accuracy that have been notified to the monitoring officer. Can I ask Democratic Services whether the electronic voting system is ready to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members for this poll?
Chairman, we have 14 members eligible and they can vote now.
Okay, so you have 30 seconds to vote.
Chairman, we have 13 votes out of the 14 cast.
Just to confirm, Chairman, there are only 13 because obviously with Councillor Graham Andrews not being present, we have only 13 to vote. Thank you.
Right. So
that all votes are in, Chairman.
Okay, if you could display the vote, please.
12 in favour of approving the minutes and 1 abstain.
Okay, thank you very much. Those minutes are carried. If you could just alert me if Councillor Andrews does actually come into the meeting. Item 5, Chairman's announcements. I'd just like to thank members for attending the site visits yesterday. We had a good turnout. Mr. Brace, the planning officer, was obviously dealing with each of the 3 applications on the site visits and presented to members exceptionally well. I think it was gave all the members a very good insight into the applications that are in front of us this morning. So I thank everybody for that. We now move on then to item 6, which is the first application before us this morning. Councillor Paul Simons is the local ward councillor for this application. Mr. Carl Brace is the planning officer that is dealing with this, and it is for land at Maryvale Lane, Ross-on-Wye, Herefordshire, outline planning permission for 16 dwellings with all matters reserved except for access. So we have 2 speakers for this application. I've already welcomed Mr. Beddoe, who will be speaking on behalf of the applicant. I will call upon him to speak following the officer's presentation. We have one other speaker, Mr. Daniels, a local resident speaking in opposition who's made a written statement. I will call upon that after Mr. Brace has made his presentation. So without further ado, I'll move across to Mr. Brace, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. On the basis that you can all hear me clearly, I'll proceed. Firstly, thank you to the members who attended yesterday's Magical Mystery Tour of Herefordshire. I think it was a very worthwhile experience, and hopefully not just in terms of the sites, but also getting to know Herefordshire a little bit better as well. Turning to this first application, the site is Maryvale in Ross-on-Wye. It is an outline application for 16 dwellings, of which 6 would be affordable, and I emphasise all matters are reserved except for access. As set out in the report at 1.6, the definition of the components of reserved matters are presented for you, and for the avoidance of doubt, access in summarised form is defined to mean the accessibility to which the site for vehicles, cycles and pedestrians is made, and how these fit into the surrounding access network. So turning to the slide before you, as always, the site is denoted by the red star, and as members will see, is in an existing residential area of Ross-on-Wye. The site, as members will observe driving into and out of Ross and from the site, is within walking and cycling distance to the town centre, employment land at Alton Road, and numerous community facilities in the general area. If we can go to slide 2, please. The application site is shown in more detail, outline red on the plan at the top and identified on the aerial photograph by the arrow. Members will note the site adjoins residential development on all sides and has a frontage onto Maryvale Lane, where it's delineated by an established hedgerow. As members will recall from yesterday's site visit, a public right-of-way runs along, however, outside of the southern boundary of the site. The site is a paddock associated with number 29 Maryvale Lane, and the dwelling and remnants of curtilage located to the north and adjacent to the red line area. As we saw yesterday, the paddock was currently grazed by 3 horses, and it is worthwhile for members to note the site is private land and has no public access rights. If we can go to slide 3, please. The site is allocated in the Ross Neighbourhood Development Plan for residential development, as shown here with the extracts from that plan. Members will note that the application site itself doesn't utilise the whole of the allocated site, and we'll explore that in a little bit more detail as we go through this presentation. The NDP is at referendum stage, and as directed by the NPPF, significant weight can be attributed to the NDP policies within it. Just for members' note, the referendum was to be held. However, we went into lockdown around about 7 to 10 days before that referendum was to take place. As members will be aware, referendums are now suspended till May next year. Turning back to the allocated site before you, the site is also subject to a number of specific criteria within its allocation policy in the NDP. Those criteria are: existing hedgerows are to be retained and reinforced, except where road and footpath access is required or frontage development is proposed. Subject to detailed arboricultural survey and site-specific design considerations, the group of trees around the existing house and the trees in the upper garden are to be retained. Road access is to be taken from Maryvale Lane itself, and an additional pedestrian access should be provided through and over the site. Further to members' question yesterday from the site visit, the land classification mapping by DEFRA returns the designation of the site as urban. However, I do note, and foreseeing where that question may have been hinting at, the NDP does have a policy regarding allotments, and it could have, if it so chose and evidenced, allocated sites for allotment use. However, the NDP does, and I think this is actually a very good policy within it, have a specific policy regarding allotments within Ross-on-Wye under policy SC3, and looks to retain those existing allotments unless there is very good justification or replacement of them. If we can turn to slide 4, please. For the decision-making process and members' clarity, here is the application site edge red and confirmation of the ownership of the rest of the site denoted blue, which includes the remnant curtilage area and existing dwelling on the site. If we can turn to slide 5, please. As stated, the application is outlined with all matters reserved except access. However, a helpful illustrative layout has been provided. The salient points from this show, firstly, the quantum of development can be delivered on site quite readily. Further to that, the development can come forward and the trees can be retained within the centre of the site as required by the NDP policy. Parking serving the proposed development can be provided wholly on site. And finally, a pedestrian link through the site to the public right of way to the south of the site is secured. If we can turn to slide 6, please. The plan here details the proposed vehicular access arrangements in more detail, with new access serving the site and the proposed development. The blue wash on the plan denotes the extent of the highways land around the immediate site access area. The blue hatch line on the plan demonstrates appropriate visibility over 43 metres in each direction can be achieved, utilising both the site area and highway land itself. As confirmed within the report at 4.4, the Transportation Manager has no objection to the proposals. We can go to slide 7, please. The slide shows views of the site of Maryvale Lane, which will be familiar with members from the site visit yesterday. And of specific point to note here is that members will see the land rises up from Maryvale Lane across the site, as you can see on the photograph right. The trees at which the NDP requires by policy to be retained, you can see in the centre of the site. And the hedgerow visible on the bottom and right pictures is the hedgerow which runs adjacent to the public right of way and denotes the southern boundary of the site. And if we turn to slide 8, the reference public right of way is shown visually left and has viewed that photograph taken from where the red star is on the plan right. The route to the public right of way is denoted with the dashed purple line, and as you can note, members, you'll see there's further lines in purple heading to the east from that public right of way, so you can see how the site and then via this public right of way it can link into existing pedestrian routeways through Ross-on-Wye. And finally, if we can turn to slide 9. The final slide presents the Alton Road and Maryvale Lane junction, which we examined yesterday. And as members will also be aware, from Alton Road to Maryvale Lane, access to the site can also be achieved from the road called the Greaslers. So turning to the summary of the proposals in the application, members are well versed that Section 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 requires decisions to be made in accordance with the local plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The proposal is a residential development on an allocated site within a neighbourhood development plan that can be attributed significant weight. Further to that, site-specific requirements regarding point of access from Maryvale Lane, retention of existing trees and provision of a pedestrian link are delivered and provided by these proposals. There are no technical objections from consultees, and in particular the Transportation Manager and Highways Authority have no objection. Access details meet technical standards, parking is provided on site, and NDP and core strategy policies regarding transportation and movement, including sustainable transport, are satisfied. The MPPF test is severe with regards to impact on the road network and safety is not considered to be met. If we now consider the benefits and impacts of the proposals against each of the 3 roles or dimensions of sustainable development, which members will know is economic, social and environmental, in turn I've assessed the proposals against these 3 criteria. The positive economic benefits arising from the scheme will include direct economic betterment for local shops and businesses and employment and supply of materials during the construction phase. However, these are not unique to this proposal and apply to all such developments. On the basis of the scale and nature of the developments, I attach moderate weight to these benefits. The proposal delivers a mixed range of housing, including affordable housing, which helps meet identified local demand now and for the future. The delivery of these houses will contribute to social well-being of Ross through occupiers using and contributing to the town's existing society and life. Furthermore, the development represents a planned response to growth for the town as set out within core strategy policy RW1 and the Ross Neighbourhood Development Plan, as it is development of an allocated site. Furthermore, the proposal will make an important contribution to rectifying the council's affordable housing delivery and overall housing land supply position. As such, the social objective is considered to be satisfied, and I attribute significant weight to the benefit in community terms, particularly to the delivery of affordable housing, establishing sustainable communities, employment opportunities and a sense of place that development will secure and delivering the planned growth of the town. I also attach weight to the confidence in the public will derive in the planning system from the approval of development in accordance with the area's neighbourhood development plan, which of course was created by the community's efforts and engagement within the planning process as a whole. The weight I attach is further increased due to the council's lack of an up-to-date 5-year housing and land supply. With regard to the environmental dimension, the proposal will enable more sustainable patterns of activity through providing new homes located where the town centre and other services and facilities are accessible by foot or bicycle from these new houses. At this outline stage, the Council's Building Conservation Officer has not identified any harm to the setting of designated heritage assets, and therefore the proposals would comply with the requirements of policy LD4 of the core strategy. Taking all of the above into account, there is no evident harm arising in relation to other technical matters. The proposal is considered to be compliant with the core strategy and with the policies of the emerging NDP to which significant weight can be given. The application delivers a sustainable infill residential development at Ross as directed by core strategy policy RW1 and the Ross neighbourhood plan. As such, I attach positive weight to the proposals as their delivery would also enable defence against unplanned speculative development in locations more harmful in environmental terms. Policy SS1 of the core strategy reflects the presumption of favour of sustainable development in national policy and provides that planning applications that accord with these policies in the core strategy will be approved unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Policy SS1 also aligns itself with the NPPF paragraph 11 and as a matter of local plan policy states where there are no policies relevant to the application or relevant policies are out of date at the time of making the decision, and then the council will grant permission unless material considerations indicate otherwise. As detailed within the report and this presentation, there is conformity with the housing and sustainable development policies of the development plan, which includes the Ross neighbourhood plan. These policies are consistent with the guidance contained within the NPPF. Further to the local plan policy compliance described, it is also noted the council does not have an up-to-date 5-year supply of housing land, and as such, planning permission should be granted without delay. On the basis of the clear direction from NPPF paragraph 11, the local plan policy and wider aims and objectives compliance, and there being no technical reasons or demonstrable harm to dictate otherwise, recommendation is approved. A recommendation for approval is recommended to members with the conditions as set out at the bottom of your report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. I now move across to the speakers this morning on this application. We have two speakers, as previously mentioned, Mr. Daniels, who is an objector, and I asked Mr. Brown if he would read out the written submission from Mr. Daniels, please.
Legal position. The Ross and Y development plan, which includes this site, is subject to a local referendum, which has been delayed indefinitely due to COVID-19. We submit that until this referendum and its outcome are published, the Herefordshire Planning Authority is not able to adjudicate this application. Traffic and parking. The proposal for 16 new builds with vehicular access to Maryvale Lane will inevitably result in a large increase in traffic. Maryvale Lane provides access to Alton Road, which has a narrow carriageway with many parked vehicles and is subject to heavy traffic flow, including agricultural and commercial vehicles. The public right-of-way between Princess Way and the proposed development is used by young children walking to school. They have to cross Maryvale Lane to access the PROW. Loss, privacy, social amenity. The plans submitted do not specify the type of properties that are proposed, but suggest two-storey builds. The west side of Maryvale Lane comprises low-rise bungalow properties. Princess Way, a cul-de-sac off Maryvale Lane, which also comprises of bungalow properties which are adjacent to the proposed development, would suffer a serious loss of privacy and public amenity by the proposed construction. Should the authority decide to grant this application, consideration should be given to restricting the builds adjacent to Princess Way to low-rise properties. Between the PROW and the proposed development is a hedge which provides some privacy and is a favoured nesting, roosting place for wild birds. It also contains a walnut tree which should be protected. What are the proposals with regard to this hedge? Loss, open space, green space. This land, which has not been cultivated, is a haven for wildlife, including field mice, buzzards and raptors. Bats are frequently sighted here. It also contains many species of wild plants. The proposed development would destroy this habitat. And that concludes the statement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I now move across to Mr. Beddoe, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant. And if I could remind you that you'll have 3 minutes in your own time. Thank you, Mr. Beddoe.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Nick Beddoe and I'm a chartered planner and a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. And I'm the planning agent on the application, which proposes a scheme of 16 homes, including 10 open market units and 6 affordable homes on the paddock site within the settlement boundary of Ross-on-Wye. The site, as previously mentioned, is provisionally allocated under the emerging neighbourhood plan for the town. The proposals face no objection from the Highways Department, no objection from the Conservation Officer, the County Ecologist, and no objection from the Tree Officer, with all trees being retained. The proposal also benefit from the support of the Ross-on-Wye Town Council, and the plans satisfy the conditions of the emerging neighbourhood plan allocation policy. The application follows a previous planning application on this site for 10 open market units. That application was withdrawn following agreement of the local planning authority that a higher density proposal would make best use of the available land. As such, the proposals are based upon a sound understanding of market conditions and represent the optimal viable approach to developing the site. The proposed development would also provide a raft of Section 106 commitments in order to offset the projected impacts of the scheme upon the local community. These cover a policy compliant contribution of 40% affordable housing to be delivered on site as 6 new homes. They also cover a financial contribution to transport infrastructure, education, play space, outdoor sports, waste, libraries and healthcare. Although the application is made in outline, the submitted plans are based upon a detailed appreciation of the site constraints and opportunities. In particular, the plans have incorporated a drainage swale utilising the natural topography of the land. All trees have been retained and their root protection zones have been protected. A new footpath has been proposed onto Eastfield Road to improve pedestrian connectivity in the area. And active street frontage onto Maryvale Lane has also been shown in order to reflect the prevailing form along the street. The site presents an opportunity to deliver a high quality, small scale development within an established residential area. And the plans are a product of an iterative design process through which the comments of key stakeholders have been acknowledged, most recently resulting in amendments to provide the footpath link and to adjust the on-site parking arrangements. The proposals are policy compliant. The planning officer recommends the application for approval, and we kindly request that members grant this consent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beddoe. Can I now request that Mr. Beddoe leaves the meeting by being put back in the waiting room, but I'd like to remind him that he can watch the live stream of this meeting on the council's YouTube channel. Thank you, and good day to you. Right, I now move across to Ward Councillor for this morning for this application, Councillor Paul Simons. He speaks first and then has a right to speak at the end of the debate, but he will not have a vote. So in your own time, please, Mr. Simons, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, and obviously thank you all for your attendance at the committee, at the site visit yesterday. As has been stated, the site in question is a much loved green space with mature trees, grazing horses and the like. And like many residents, I'm loath to see the loss of this amenity in the heart of Ross East Ward. Notwithstanding this, the site's been identified in Herefordshire Core Strategy, Ross NDP, as suitable for residential development for up to 25 homes. You will obviously see from the number of objections that the development will nonetheless have a significant impact on local residents. Following our site visit yesterday, I'd like to highlight some key local concerns with this development, particularly in relation to highway impacts. At the site visit, we saw the lack of capacity in Maryvale Lane at its junction with Alton Street. And has been referenced already, this causes queuing in Alton Street, which is effectively the southern bypass to the town with large farm vehicles, buses, HGVs. The other key issue about this junction is that it's lower than the section of Maryvale Lane adjoining the proposed development site, and has a continuous line of parked vehicles opposite the development site. This means that southbound vehicles, including buses, which Maryvale Lane is part of a bus route, joining from Alton Street, are forced onto the wrong side of the road, but do not have a clear view of oncoming traffic due to the rising ground level. If they meet a vehicle coming the other way, the vehicles heading towards Alton Street are forced onto the footway, which has a high pedestrian footfall as it's a main access route into the town centre. Members will, I'm sure, recall this actually occurred while we were standing at the site yesterday. Initial comments on the development that there is a concern from Herefordshire Council regarding the capacity of this road and the wider impact on the town. Therefore, it shouldn't be taken that as no TRO has been put in place, that there isn't a concern on capacity, road safety and movement of all traffic. Something of a double negative in there, but I hope you'll see that it's not quite as straightforward perhaps as the applicant might suggest. The other issues here are that vehicles trying to avoid the Alton Street Maryvale Lane junction use the Gresleys and Penyard Lane as a rat run. However, if you have the opportunity to drive that way after the site visit, you'll have seen that Penyard Lane is actually only single carriageway where the Gresleys joins it, and has extremely poor visibility towards Alton Street and no pedestrian footway, which obviously compromises highway safety there. There is a further highway safety concern relating to footpath ZK26 that runs along the southern boundary of the site. As has been identified, it's a well-used route to local schools, GP surgeries, etc. But there are frequent incidents of children running down the footpath and emerging suddenly into Maryvale Lane, where due to parked vehicles, there are vehicles passing on their side of the carriageway in both directions. I can actually confirm that there was a child on a scooter was recently emerged too fast from the footpath and struck a moving vehicle in Maryvale Lane, fortunately without serious injury. But there is an opportunity with this development to significantly reduce that risk in the way the highway access is designed. Just as severe, the cumulative impact of the development on existing problems is nonetheless significant. Highway officers have assessed correctly what's been put before them by the applicant, but that doesn't mean the proposed highway access is the best solution. The proposed new junction does nothing to alleviate current problems and will bring additional vehicles into a situation which already poses risks to pedestrians, as we saw yesterday. I would therefore urge you to defer this application and require the applicant to resubmit with an access show designed onto Maryvale Lane at the southern end of the development, close to the ZK26 footpath. In addition to alleviating pressure at the blind crest of the hill, which we saw yesterday, it would obviously minimise impact of the development on traffic and safety problems in Maryvale Lane and Alton Street. It would also provide an opportunity to improve pedestrian safety where footpath ZK26 joins Maryvale Lane by integrating it into the new junction design. And a final issue which residents have raised concern with is that, as shown at the moment, the balancing pond in the southeastern corner of the site, if were it to surcharge, would obviously flood properties on the opposite side of Maryvale Lane. However, by moving it to the northeastern boundary of the site, where the current site access is proposed, it will be likely that any surcharge from that pond would go down perhaps the Gresleys or Maryvale Lane using the highway drainage rather than surcharging into properties. So that is my first urge, that this is deferred for a better junction design to the south of the site. However, if members are minded to grant permission for the development, I would request that conditions are imposed on the developer, either as reserved matters at outline or detail stage. Firstly, Section 106 monies identified for this development are used to develop with the Highway Authority a scheme to alleviate problems caused by parking along the northern end of Maryvale Lane, the consequent impact on the junction with Alton Street and running along the Gresleys. This scheme, in my view, should be implemented prior to commencement of the development, if necessary, at Herefordshire Council's cost, if that has to be the way to do it, and recovered from the developer once the development is complete. The second condition I'd like to see with this application is that pedestrian safety measures must be implemented where footpath ZK26 joins Maryvale Lane to remove the risk of pedestrians coming into conflict with vehicles. The third issue, which has also been identified this morning and I referred to yesterday, is that this is an area of the whole of that side of Maryvale Lane is bungalows, including Princess Way and indeed Eastfield Road, where it backs onto those developments. In my view, the development should be single story only. However, if officers advise that that's not possible in planning terms, then the buildings along the Maryvale Lane boundary should be single story with suitable planting along the southern boundary to mitigate visual impact of taller buildings on the properties in Princess Way. And finally, a relatively detailed issue. At the moment, under the Section 106 agreements, the outdoor sports provision goes to a number of clubs, tennis, football, rugby. I'd like to see Ross Rowing Club added as one of the beneficiary organisations for the outdoor sports Section 106, as it, in my view, it's of equal value to residents as pitch-based sports. And active membership ranges from early teens to people in their 70s and 80s, and the club successfully engages young people and adults in sport and physical activity, competitive or otherwise. So I would like to see that added to the Section 106. I have to confirm I am a club member, but as I'm not voting, I'm advised that's not an interest I specifically need to declare. Thank you. I think that's as much as I'd like to say at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. I just will remind members that this is an outline planning application we're here to confirm access arrangements and the principle of development rather than the detail of the development. I've got 4 members indicating they wish to speak. And the first on my list is Councillor Selden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, could I just ask Mr. Bishop what the impact of a deferment would be on this application? Because I could see the possibility of a challenge through the appeal process for non-determination. Should we go down that route? Mr. Bishop?
I'd like to respond to that, please, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Chairman. The applicants would be in a very, very strong position going to an appeal with an allocated site within the NDP and with the professional highways officers identifying that the access is acceptable to the site. And so for the council trying to defend a position, it would be very, very difficult. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also applied for a cost as well against the council, being an allocated site and with the professional officers supporting it.
Okay, thank you for that. The main issue in my mind, as highlighted by Councillor Simons and many others, is the highways issues along here. And if I could ask Mr. Brace now a question about the impact of the junction between Maryvale Lane and Alton Street, of the projections of traffic movements there, please, Mr. Brace.
Mr. Brace.
Thank you, Chairman. It's probably best to get the quality of answer members probably want to bring in colleague Mr. Lewis, the Transportation Manager, if that's agreeable to Chairman.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Lewis, if I could ask you to comment then, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just been reviewing the transport statement that accompanied the application for this, and they did do some work on the junction capacity of Alton Road and Maryvale Lane. The existing flows are reasonably light with a PM two-way flow of 300 vehicles, and this is assessed against a capacity of around 900 vehicles. So the introduction of the 16 additional vehicles wouldn't result in an impact on the highway network that could be classed as severe, which is the test that's demanded by the NPPF. Does that assist?
It does, though I wouldn't say 16 vehicles. I would probably say closer to 30 vehicles going on an average vehicles per household.
So that was just the PM peak. So that's an hourly capacity. So obviously there'll be an amount of trips in the morning and then an amount of trips in the evening. So it's hourly, sorry, rather than daily.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. That's most helpful. Members, as far as I can see, that there are very, very few grounds we could say that this is worthy of deferment. I think the principle of development has been confirmed by its inclusion in the Ross Neighbourhood Development Plan, and given the situation we have with the 5-year housing land supply, I would think that deferring it actually could possibly be counterproductive. So with that in mind, Chairman, I would propose that this outline development is approved subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Selden. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Foxton. And I have you down next to speak. So if you like to take your 3 minutes now, Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to Mr. Brace for his presentation yesterday. The application covers SS1, sustainable development, SS3, releasing land for residential development, RW1, development in Ross, H1, affordable housing, H3, appropriate mix of housing. The existing line of trees are going to be maintained in the plan, tree roots protected, as in BS 5387. Archaeological interest on the site is very limited, hence no objection. The main issue of the impact of increased traffic and highway safety, that's the main issue. As motorists turn into Maryvale Lane from Alton Road, the entrance is too narrow, even for the amount of traffic we witnessed yesterday on our site visit. Therefore, some forward-thinking safety measures are needed on the lane, calls for a TRO. I feel the traffic issue could be addressed by highway planners. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foxton. Next on the list is Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry that I couldn't make the site visit yesterday. I mean, I have huge sympathy for residents who are losing another greenfield site, and it's just really unfortunate. But I think we really need to find a way to live alongside nature and in ways that don't create more problems. And I think that this is the real challenge of housing for not the future, for housing right now. One of the things I wanted to ask in terms of the impact of traffic and on the highway, I did notice when I looked through Ross Town Council's and Ross on Wye's sort of general information yesterday that there is no car club in Ross on Wye, and I feel that it would be a really good idea for given how much development is coming to Ross, that actually the authorities start looking at establishing a car club. And is it possible that the 106 discussions are already complete, or could there still be some discussion around actually establishing a car club in Ross-on-Wye using some of the 106 contributions from this development to actually start solving some of these problems, because they're just not going to go away if we don't start addressing the transport issues and how we make modal changes. We're just going to jam ourselves up completely. So somehow we need to find a solution, and I think the part of the solution lies within the 106 contributions.
Thank you. Any officer wish to make any comment on that at this stage? Mr. Bishop? Carl? Mr. Brace, yeah.
The section 106 is in draft form, and as presented in the report shows the current requirements in terms of civil compliance at this moment in time. Of course, all figures are index linked. As outlined by the local member in terms of some of his requests, we can, through the section 106 planning obligations manager, look at some of these options within how transportation monies are directed or spent. So that is something we could readily review and seek agreement with local member and you, Mr. Chairman, at that point through the planning obligations manager.
Okay, I think that's useful. Thank you, Mr. Brace, for that. I move to Councillor Rowan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say anything about a car club, but if we're going to take a little indicative 106 monies away from the two areas shown and help people buy cars, I'd be completely and utterly against that. If you want to buy a car or get together with like-minded people to buy a car, that's entirely up to you. The site visit yesterday showed what a great site it was, near employment places, the largest employment area in the south of the county. I think that for me, the standout part is the fact that there are 6 affordable homes. That means that young families will be able to afford to live in the town of Ross-on-Wye near to the rest of their family and to take advantage of what is a beautiful area, absolutely stunning. Yes, it is a pity we're losing a greenfield site. Not an awful lot to do about that. I would rather see houses built there than built further out of town. Everything is within walking distance. Totally get what Councillor Foxton said about maybe some engineering works to make that corner a little bit safer. Personally, I would be, if I was a local member, I'd be looking to extend those double yellow lines up from that junction, take away at least 2 or 3 car parking spaces. That would give a clear curl, but I will be going with the officer recommendation today as an excellent site.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rowan. Councillor Wilding.
Thanks, Chair. I actually want to vote against this site. What a surprise. I think to develop this site is destroying a little patch of green in amongst a huge area of dense housing. I understand what the officers say about recommending it. I understand about jobs. I understand about the NDP. I mean, talking about the NDP, presumably the NDP, when they're formed, they're under a lot of pressure to find and identify sites to build. So that's why they've identified this site. They wouldn't have done it unless they were under pressure. I would cite policies LD2 and LD3. So LD2 protecting biodiversity in the area, LD3 protecting existing green infrastructure, corridors, links. Only a few days ago, the council voted to help protect hedgehogs, and here we are suggesting we destroy an area which I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1 or 2 hedgehogs in. So all in all, I don't think it's a good idea to develop this site. But if we vote for it to go ahead, then I think we should say to the developers, what we want to see is we're going to have 16 houses, make them small, all affordable, all small. I take what Councillor Fagan said about car clubs. Let's have a thing in the regulations that says you can only move in if you agree to be part of a car club. Have a car club actually sited on the site with an electric car provided out of 106 money, and people that move in agree that they're only going to use that electric vehicle and share it. That's what a car club is, sharing one car between numerous homes, not providing money for people to all buy their own car. Thanks.
I will just remind members that this is an outline plan application, and details such as just been mentioned will come at the reserved matters stage if this application goes through this morning. Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I start by saying that I'm happy to second Councillor Selden's earlier proposal with reluctance. I believe we have to develop this site. From what Councillor Wilding was just saying, and I agree with much of what he says, what we cannot escape is the fact that we are obliged to provide more housing. And this is close to the city centre. The further out you put it, the more likely you are to, to get more car journeys, etc., etc. And there's a high probability that if we were to refuse it, we would lose an appeal and be stuck with the costs. So I'm happy to second Councillor Selden's proposal. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that offer, but we've already got a seconder.
Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry.
Councillor Foxton seconded it. So,
sorry, Chairman.
I now move across to Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I had some sympathy with what Councillor Wilding was saying initially about the fact the loss of the green space within the towns and cities of our county, but unfortunately that's not taking account of in planning law, both nationally or locally. I have to say, I find that rather weird that the idea of conditions on being only people who were members of car club could be buy or rent accommodation in this particular development. That I think is a non-starter to begin with. Goes against every law that we have in the country. I just can't see any reason we can refuse this particular application. All the details will come later, and I hope we'll look carefully at what those specific proposals within the site will be when they appear. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor James. I've got no further speakers. Oh, Councillor Milne.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very late entrance. Simply to say that looking at the indicative layout, which is in terms of its traffic infrastructure provides classically in this sort of very 20th century way, driveways and 2 car parking spaces per unit. It is extraordinary, isn't it, that here we have a highly sustainable location, very well served with footpaths and potentially with cycle routes, that nonetheless is still laid out in this kind of 1980s thinking that everyone has to have 2 motor cars, no matter what minimum. It just as a point of view that affirms what councillors Wilding and Fagan have been saying. What I would so welcome would be whether or not it has a car club, and that would be a matter of choice for the future residents. We need to be designing so that it enables those choices to be made. So I'm not denying that motor cars are going to be part of the future, and I hope that they will be electric ones. But what we should be doing is encouraging people to, in terms of the layout, to share this privilege that having and owning and using a motor car in a congested town centre is. And by that I mean that there would be, I would suggest simply an entrance to a small car parking area with electric car parking points, and everywhere within this very compact settlement is accessed by foot. There's no part of it that is any more than than a few short yards from any other part of it. There's no reason, in other words, to cover large swathes of it with tarmac. So that is a point of view that if applicants in the future watching this stream would like to take away from me, that when they're submitting applications to Herefordshire Council, and they want the members to come on board with them, that is a principle I would like them to take away. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, I allowed you to carry on, but I'll remind members again that this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for the access. I've got Councillor Roan looking to come in for a second time, and then Councillor Polly Andrews. Councillor Roan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With all due respect, are we dealing with a outline planning application in front of us now? Are we setting the future sort of policies for applications? We can talk all day about this. I really thought it was dealing with as in front of us. I'll take guidance from you, Mr. Bishop, Chair.
As I said, this is an outline planning application, so I'm going to move on to our next speaker, which is Polly Andrews, Councillor Polly Andrews, and I'll accept Councillor Wilding to come in for a second time, but I think that we're drawing this debate to a close very shortly. Councillor Polly Andrews, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Rowan and yourself have actually said what I was going to say. I thought we were dealing with an outline application with all matters reserved, not discussing the future of car clubs or that kind of thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. And I do accept we are discussing an outline proposal, but I also think, as Councillor Milne very well put, we're talking about how it should be in the future and how it should be now. We've got a captive member of the development club watching this live stream. So I'm saying to him, please consider doing this sort of stuff in this development if we give you permission. Really have a good think about it and do it brilliantly. And then this will be a beacon to show other developers in the county how they can develop and at the same time meet our ecological problems that we've got coming down the line with climate change.
You're muted, Chair.
My apologies. On that note, thank you, Councillor Wilding. I'm going to draw the debate to a close. We've got no further speakers, and invite Mr. Bishop if he wants to make any comments before I go back to the ward councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's been a lot of debate on the layout, etc., and the Chairman has quite rightly identified this as an outline application where the principle and access are requested for consideration. All the other aspects are subject to future considerations. Obviously, the developer would have heard the comments from members regarding a potential scheme coming forward, etc. And obviously, officers themselves will be looking for an enhanced scheme on what's being put forward. What's been put forward as the indicative plan purely identifies that 16 dwellings can be located on there. Doesn't mean to say that we support that layout. And I know from the case I was talking to the case, we would look for an improved and enhanced layout to that as well. Members have had a good debate on this. They picked up the key points, which is the pedestrian and highways access, the issues with Maryvale Lane, etc., and the junction. They've also identified the issues relating to the ways to overcome that. And Councillor Foxton, I congratulate you on your recommendations and suggestions as well. That an approval for this site with the transportation money would enable a TRO to be undertaken and for those highway improvements to be undertaken as well. Likewise with the junction of the pedestrian footpath down to the lane as well. The highways team can look at that with funding as well from the section 106. That can be achieved as well. So these are all benefits that can be achieved as part of this this application over and above what we have there at the existing point in time. The officers clearly identified the proposal is in line with the emerging neighbourhood plan for Ross-on-Wye, where they have identified sites, and they could have left this site out if they so wish, but they have identified it for development, and that's been taken forward by the owners through this application. The proposal is therefore is compliant in highway terms and planning policy terms for development of the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I'll move across to Councillor Paul Simons to make any further comments before we actually go to the vote. Thank you, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Chairman, and obviously thank you, members, for your thoughts. Can I just very quickly clarify? I think Mr. Bishop's identified this, but the issues that I raised were minded to grant this consent around a TRO for the Alton Street Junction and pedestrian safety improvements for the footpath ZK26 and the rowing club contributions. Am I correct in thinking that those would all be picked up as reserved matters and no further debate is required over them at this point?
Chairman, I'm happy to identify that we can include Ross Rowing Club within the section 106, and I'm sure the TRO can pick up the pedestrian safety off Maryvale Lane and off the pedestrian access. Mr. Lewis, can you confirm that?
Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd have no problem with including the TRO, and I think that the draft 106 agreement already makes reference to pedestrian connectivity improvements, which I would suggest could be used on the public right of way as we've discussed in the debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, if I can just very quickly summarise then. So obviously you've heard the arguments for and against the development. I don't dispute that what's on the table today is an improvement on the previous outline application in providing a much better mix of housing, including affordable units, as well as Section 106 contributions. But it still cannot be denied that, that there are adverse impacts on residents in Maryvale Lane, which could be mitigated through better design. Traffic impacts could be significantly reduced by moving the access road to the southern end of the site. And as I've identified, that would give an opportunity to improve pedestrian safety on the footpath there. The applicant has been aware of these issues and concerns since 2018 when the first application came in, but has chosen not to address them. I would imagine as their interest is in primarily doing the minimum required to secure consent in order to sell on to a developer. The highway officer is required to assess whether what's proposed meets current standards, which they've done, but their role is not to propose better solutions. I would say, therefore, that as elected representatives, it falls to us to seek the best solution for the people we represent. A moral imperative, if you like. So I do still urge deferral of the decision for the applicant to resubmit with site access moved to the south of the site. However, if members feel unable to support that, then obviously I confirm the reserve matters and conditions are applied in relation to Maryvale Lane TRO, the footpath, building heights and the outdoor sports contributions. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. We now go to the voting stage on this application. We have in front of us a proposal by Councillor Selden and seconded by Councillor Foxton that this application is approved with all the conditions, etc., that have been mentioned in the report and in this meeting today. Can I remind members of the committee that you can only vote on this application before us this morning if you've been present for the whole of the presentation and discussion of this application. Does anybody need to advise me that they are not permitted to vote? Right, I believe that everybody feels that they're in a position to vote. Can I ask Democratic Services whether the electronic voting system is ready and to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members for this poll, please?
Chairman, there are 13 eligible committee members that can vote now.
Right, thank you. So you've got 30 seconds to actually cast your vote and submit it, please.
Chairman, all members have voted, 11 in favour to approve, 2 against.
2 against and no abstentions. So that application is carried for approval. And we now are going to go into an adjournment for 10 minutes. This will be the first adjournment of 2. Because we've got Mr. Brace presenting on all 3 applications, I think it's only fair that we give him a 10-minute break between each application just to get his head around each application and for members as well. Right, thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the meeting following our adjournment. Can I request that the public speakers for item 7 on our agenda, attending as virtual attendees, Mrs. Whitlock, who is a local resident speaking in opposition, and Ms. Cass, the applicant's agent. Can we have them admitted into the room, please? Right, good morning to Mrs. Whitlock and Ms. Cass. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting, and I will call upon you to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. Can I just check with you both that you can hear? If you can unmute yourself on the left-hand side bottom of your screen, just to confirm.
This is Ellie Cass.
Okay, fine, thank you. I can see and hear you. Thank you, Mrs. Whitlock.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you can mute yourself again, please, now. I think we're all present now, yes. Right, we move on then to the second application today, item 7, the old hop yard, Bleethwood, Ludlow, which is reorganisation and upgrade of the existing Bleethwood Lodges Country Park to include demolition of the existing site buildings, change of use of the on-site residential property for a holiday let, the construction of a replacement facilities, meeting and greeting building, maintenance building, and provision of accommodation in the form of 45 lodges with associated access and parking. We have 2 speakers this morning. Mrs. Whitlock, who is a local resident who will speak in objection, and Ms. Cass, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant. And I will call upon them to speak following the officer's presentation. The officer making the presentation this morning is Carl Brace, and the local member who is Councillor Stone, local ward councillor for this application. He is a member of the committee, but will stand aside from the committee and will not get a vote on this application. So he will have the opportunity to speak first and then conclude the debate prior to going into the vote. So without further ado, I call upon Mr. Brace to make the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome back, members. Here, you'll recall the third site visit from yesterday at Bleethwood in North Herefordshire. The purpose, I think, really of this presentation is to build on what is, quite a detailed and lengthy report, given the number of issues and factors in play here, and also reflecting the amount of local interest that this application has generated members will note there's 119 letters of support, 83 letters of objection. And if we reflect on the characteristics of the local area, I'm sure the local member would confirm this is probably some sort of record for an application within his ward. So significant local interest, and that obviously fully warrants the level of detail that both officers and this committee will give the application. So if we turn to the first slide, as ever, the red star denotes the site. And as we know from yesterday's visit, the site is in an open countryside location in the north of Herefordshire and very close to the border with Worcestershire. The site is accessed from Bleafwood Lane, a C-class road, which in turn links to the A456 to the south, which on the plan before you is the green line running east-west on the map, so for the red star. At its extreme, the A456 runs from central Birmingham to the A49 west of the site, so it is an important route through the West Midlands, connecting Birmingham, the West Midlands and the Black Country, to the Marches Corridor and North Wales. Members will note here there is no AONB designation applicable to the site or adjoining the site, and there's no heritage assets in terms of designated assets in the immediate vicinity or upon the site. If we can turn to slide 2, please. The location plan and the aerial photograph show the site and its setting in greater context. And again, members' attention is drawn to Bleafwood Lane and the A456. And if we can turn to slide 3, please. If we turn to the proposals under consideration here, members, just for clarity, this is a full application with all the details before you for assessment. Here's the proposed site plan, and talking you through this, to note 45 tourist lodges are proposed, offering a range of berth sizes within those units, a meet and greet building, a maintenance building, 2 drainage ponds, substantial new planting across the site, an enhanced and protected corridor for the public right-of-way, which runs through the middle of the site, which you should be able to make out by the pink dash and dotted line through the middle of the site. The 3 important points to consider as well, wrapped up within these proposals: all existing buildings on the site are to be removed. The significant amount of hard standing at the front and entrance to the existing site arrangements will be substantially reduced as part of this application. And finally, and probably almost most importantly, the existing site uses would all be extinguished and replaced by this proposal. If we turn to slide 4, please. For members, this slide shows an example of a proposed lodge. All lodges are single-storey units formed of 2 sections, and they meet the definition of a caravan. For clarity, I would just talk members through that legal definition for avoidance of doubt. And the definition of a caravan is considered to be a structure designed for human habitation, which is capable of being moved from one place to another. It comprises no more than 2 sections separately constructed and designed to be assembled on site by bolts, clamps, or other devices, and is capable of being moved by road from one place to another, whether towed or transported on a trailer. The 2006 amendment to the Act also included maximum size stipulations to the definition of a caravan, and these being having a length no greater than 20 metres, a width no greater than 6.8 metres, and an internal height measuring no more than 3.05 metres. Having regard to those above definitions, case law regarding twin units construction test, officers agree and accept the lodges meet the definition of a caravan. The accommodation offered over the site, as mentioned, is 45 units, which is reduced from an original proposal of 60, and would provide 9 1-bed lodges, 12 2-bed lodges, 16 3-bed lodges, 6 4-bed lodges, and 2 5-bed lodges. If we can turn to slide 5, please. The slide shows the proposed meet and greet building and its location on the site. The building has been reduced in size from the original submission and has a height to eaves of 7.5 metres and ridges 7.3 metres, with a gross external area of 98 square metres. Paragraph 6.42 of the report sets out the building specification and its sustainability credentials, especially when compared to the existing buildings on the site. If we can go to slide 6, please. The slide here shows the maintenance building elevations, floor plans, and again location on the site, and covers some 227 square metres, presented in a simple single-storey pitch roof form with a height to eaves of 7 metres and ridge height of just under 7.3 metres. Build details and energy efficiency measures to be used within these 2 buildings are opening windows to provide natural ventilation, highly insulated external walls with 150mm thick rock wall between external framing system and 50mm dense phenolic foam board to outer face of the weather boarding to achieve a U value below that required by building regulations. The buildings will be lined, taped and sealed to prevent convection heat loss. Low temperature hot water underfloor heating set within screed, and hot water provided by air source heat pumps are proposed to both units. The air source heat pumps would be located in an external enclosed compound. Furthermore, members are reminded the proposals represent redevelopment of a brownfield site. If we can turn to slide 7, please. The extensive landscaping and planting proposals are shown on the plan left against the current context right. Members will note the public right-of-way running east-west through the site and its route that is enhanced and protected and also delineated within the planting schedule. The proposal is clearly offering enhanced landscaping, planting and biodiversity gain over the existing situation, and furthermore when we bear in mind the lawful site use is applicable to the 2 fields here in play. We can turn to slide 8, please. The cross-section profile through the site is taken from the top field, which we viewed first yesterday on the site visit, and from the left is the top where the public right-of-way ends and exits the site, and then to the right is Bleafwood Lane. As you can see, a limited amount of cut and fill would be required to provide a flat surface for the lodges, but you can see how they fed into the landscape combined with both existing and proposed planting. We can turn to slide 9, please. The plan shows an indicative drainage strategy of which the council's drainage engineers have stated at paragraph 4.11 of the report to have no objections, and significant discussions have been undertaken with the applicant and our drainage engineers to arrive at an appropriate in-principle solution. Further detailed conditions ensure the appropriate technical drainage solution is delivered. And it's worth just pausing for members to reflect that within any application, the technical assessment costs are often very substantial and can only be justified if there is some certainty to a development having approval. Hence why, for example, here in terms of this application, we have an in-principle acceptance of the drainage conditions, of the drainage solution, with conditions then ensuring those detailed technical measures can come forward post-approval if that's what members do and grant permission. Reviewing this slide, members also note the topography of the site sloping west to east and towards the River Team, which is beyond the site. 2 drainage ponds are proposed and wastewater is to be dealt with by a new mains connection, and there is no objection from Severn Trent Water on that proposal. If we can turn to slide 10, please. The slide here details of the public right-of-way that I've mentioned already numerous times, which crosses the site and we viewed yesterday. The dashed line on the map shows its route and photographs of its entry off Bleafwood Lane, bottom right, and bottom left showing the view from where we assessed the site on the member visit yesterday. If we can go to slide 11, please. Members will note the objections received regarding highway safety and traffic generation, and the next 2 slides will review this matter in more detail. Here we see the junction between the A456 and Bleafwood Lane, which is a C-class road. In many ways, it's a typical rural Herefordshire junction, and one that will benefit from the cessation of touring caravans accessing and egressing the lane with regards to the site if the application is approved. If we could turn to slide 12, please. And this slide shows Bleafwood Lane and views up and down it. The views north are shown with the green arrows and views south with the red arrow. The plan in the middle with the blue dashed line shows the route of Bleafwood Lane past the site and down to the junction with the 456. The top row shows views from the existing site access up and down Bleafwood Lane. Officers are well aware of the local concerns on this topic, and the transportation manager has reviewed the application objections in some quite detail. Do particularly thank Mr. Lewis for his work on this and the amount of effort that's gone into reviewing both the application and the objections received to ensure that from my point of view, I am fully satisfied that Highway's position is both sound and robust in terms of responding with no objection to the proposals. In consideration of the Highway's implications of the development, the following key considerations have been made by planning officers and by the Highway Authority. The existing permitted use of the land on which the proposal is situated is a key factor in determining the trip rate alterations to the scheme. The current land use comprises 100 tent pitches, 60 touring caravan pitches, 6 static caravans, 8 glamping pods, with totaling some 174 pitches over the site. In addition, there are supporting activities permitted at the site, the main ones being a bar and cafeteria facilities and a boxing gymnasium. During the discussions, the scheme numbers has been reduced to 45 lodges. The trip generations to these lodges are considered broadly similar to those of the pitches. Even allowing for a significant margin of error, for example, allowing the trips generated by the lodges are 50% higher than the existing pitches, the reduction in numbers suggests that a betterment to the existing situation is likely. This is still the case if occupancy of the permitted use is assessed at 50%. The C1054, which is Bleafwood Lane, is a secondary distributed route within the highways network hierarchy. These routes typically link larger villages and HGV generators to the strategic and main distributor network. It is not considered that this proposal, generating predominantly light traffic on the network, would exceed this definition, and as a result, the proposal is in keeping with the status of the highway network, connecting the site to further afield destinations. The relatively close proximity to the site to the strategic A456 ensures the majority of trips will occur in this direction. The NPPF sets a particularly high threshold for resisting development on highway grounds. In these situations, the burden is to set out a demonstrable cumulative impact on the local network that could be classed as severe, and members will probably be now well versed with paragraph 109 of the NPPF. Given the development scale to the existing permitted use, there is insufficient grounds, it is considered, for this threshold to be reached. The NPPF also sets out that development can be resisted if there is an unacceptable risk to road safety. In this case, there is a nearby junction where the Bleafwood Lane meets the A456. This does not have a particularly poor collision history, and the trip generation to the proposal site is likely less than the permitted use of the site. So again, there is insufficient grounds to resist the development on this matter. Taking the previous considerations, but particularly the previous 2 points, the Local Highways Authority has not objected to this development. There are insufficient grounds for reason for refusal, having regard both to the NPPF and Herefordshire core strategy. If we can turn to the next slide, please. As stated, the proposal includes the removal of all existing buildings and a reduction of hard standing areas, which are then landscaped. The site has grown piecemeal, featuring plant nursery buildings, polytunnels and greenhouses, a cafe shop building, gym building and bar room. The removal of these buildings and replacement with sensitively designed and simplified buildings in a coherent manner is a net landscape benefit, let alone the environmental benefits with regards to thermal and energy efficiency of these new buildings. The removal of these buildings also removes those existing uses, which in some cases are unconstrained. And if we can turn to slide 14, please. Here, just for reference, our views over the site and the north field with the red and green arrows denoting the direction the view is taken in. The bottom picture is from the public right-of-way, looking back down across the site to Bleafwood Lane. And if we can turn to slide 15, please. And the final slide shows views over the south field with another view from the public right-of-way towards the existing buildings on the site. So turning to the summary of the application. Tourism was at the start of the plan period calculated to be worth £469 million to the county's local economy, with over 4.7 million visitors to the county per year. These are and were mainly for short stays to take advantage of our county's outstanding countryside, rich heritage and cultural offer. The sector in 2011 supported nearly 8,500 jobs. Visit Herefordshire, the agency in the county that promotes tourism alongside the council, works to develop Herefordshire as a visitor destination. The combination of Brexit and British enforced holidays due to COVID-19 offer opportunities for the growth of the tourism sector, along with very clear environmental benefits. Core Strategy Policy E4 recognises the contribution that tourism makes to the Herefordshire economy and seeks to ensure this continues and is enhanced through new developments which are of an appropriate scale, type and location. Policy RA6 emphasises the rural economy will be strengthened by providing flexibility for new and expanding rural businesses. As members will know, the site already benefits from planning permission, allowing the site to be used for 60 touring caravan pitches, 100 tent pitches, 6 static caravan pitches and 8 glamping pods, all of which can be used all year round. The site also has a cafe, restaurant and boxing gym, fitness centre and disused garden nursery buildings. As such, there is a significant quantum of permitted lawful economic use on the site, however in an uncoordinated manner with little planning control. It is anticipated that proposals would employ around 20 members of staff in permanent year-round roles. At present, the site only employs 2 staff members, and both of those are employed seasonally. It's the applicant's preference to employ locally, which is a common occurrence within the tourism sector. The redevelopment of the site represents a capital investment of around £7 million into Herefordshire. Of course, notwithstanding the economic and employment uncertainty created by COVID and impending Brexit, officers do not advocate economic development at any cost. An assessment of the proposals against the three objectives of sustainable development has been carried out. The positive economic benefits arising from the scheme are considered to be significant and will include direct economic benefit for local shops and businesses, along with employment opportunities. On the basis of the scale and nature of the development, I attach significant weight to these benefits, noting the limited opportunities there are in such an area for such substantial inward investment. The proposal delivers upgraded tourism facilities, which helps meet demand now and for the future. The delivery and use of the development would contribute to the social wellbeing of the area through occupiers using and contributing to the area's existing social life and supporting facilities, events and services. Furthermore, the development represents a planned response to tourism through the significant upgrading of an existing site which has a lawful tourism and tourism related uses. Planning conditions also ensure amenity of the area can be protected where currently it is not regarding noise and nuisance aspects. As such, the social objective is considered to be satisfied, and I attribute significant weight to the benefit in community terms, particularly in support of sustainable communities, employment opportunities, and a sense of places development will secure and deliver through the planned economic growth of the area. The proposal will also enable more sustainable patterns of activity through providing tourism facilities that enable the use and enjoyment of the countryside as a resource through being located in an undesignated landscape area with no impact on heritage assets and with ready access to an A-class road. The proposal forms redevelopment of an existing brownfield site which features unrestricted tourism and other facilities, and as such enables controls to be brought in which represent an enhancement to amenity. The significant landscape planting represents landscape and biodiversity and habitat gains which are significant and beneficial over the existing situation. Taking all of the above into account, officers consider the public benefits arising from the scheme as outlined within this presentation and the report are positive. There is no evident harm arising in relation to other technical matters as discussed, and officers do not feel the impacts of the development should tip the balance in favour of refusal. As such, I attach positive weight to the proposals as their delivery will also enable defence against existing and potential future development on the site and land uses and activities that would be harmful in environmental terms. It is considered there is conformity with the relevant policies of the development plan, which includes the Brimfield and Little Hereford neighbourhood development plan. The policies of the NDP are consistent, like the core strategy, with the guidance contained in the NPPF. The proposal also offers, if approved, the following opportunities, which are all considered to be material considerations. It will introduce more control over the site's use, which is currently absent under the current planning permissions it benefits from. It will manage how people access the site, which currently does not occur. It will deliver a more unified accommodation model to the site. It will limit the range of facilities and remove entertainment uses from the site. It will remove the range of disparate buildings which are developed in piecemeal fashion and detract from this attractive rural setting. It will enhance visitor spend in the wider area and secure new employment opportunities. And that's something that's detailed in, quite heavily in the report in terms of the numbers and the economic breakdown of the proposals. The proposal will also deliver significant landscape and biodiversity enhancements as I've outlined, and it will also make use of sustainable building design. On the basis of the clear direction from NPPF paragraph 11, the local plan policy and NPPF aims and objectives compliance, and there being no technical reasons or demonstrable harm to dictate otherwise, approval is recommended as a proposal is considered to represent sustainable development in accordance with the development plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. Very comprehensive report for members to fully appreciate this site. So thank you for that. We have two speakers registered. I've already welcomed Mrs. Whitlock and Miss Cass, who I will call upon to make their presentations now. So firstly, I'll call upon Mrs. Whitlock, who is a local resident who is objecting to the scheme. So you have 3 minutes to make your points, Mrs. Whitlock, in your own time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of many local residents. We strongly object to this development for the following reasons. The site is not sustainable for this type of development. It's in open countryside, has no footpaths, cycle routes or public transport to local facilities. All access will be by motor vehicles. Policy E4 states that large-scale developments like this should focus on Herefordshire and Hereford and the market towns, where they can easily and sustainably access Herefordshire's attractions. 45 lodges, ancillary buildings, roads and lighting across the whole site, inhabited 365 days a year, is like a small village, greater in size and population than the existing Bleethwood hamlet. A housing estate would not be built on this site, so neither should this. Objections have been raised by Highways in previous applications for this site on grounds of sustainability and safety of the A456 junction. The applicant has not adequately demonstrated the effects of the increased traffic, as their interpretation of Axiom's data is full of numerical errors, leading to an inaccurate understanding of the safety of the junction and underestimating the amounts of traffic created on Bleethwood Lane, contrary to policy MT1. As we're in the north of Herefordshire, any tourist spend will go to Ludlow and Tenbury, both out of county. Within 1.5 miles of this site, there is a lodge park in construction and another in the planning stage for 40 and 25 lodges respectively. If Bleethwood Lodge's application is passed, there will be a glut in the area, affecting tourism by reducing choice for potential holidaymakers and impacting negatively on the local economy because campers rely more on local businesses for their daily needs and entertainment than the occupants of fully furnished lodges with hot tubs. The current consent better fulfills the requirements of policies E4, RA6 and BLH18 in terms of appropriate scale and by retaining the camping field, the openness of the countryside. The current owner's licence is for a modest 15 touring caravans and 40 tent pitches, not the much quoted 60 touring caravans and 100 tent pitches. The current small-scale operation of mixed accommodation types allows for a variety of tourists and incomes to enjoy the tranquility of the countryside. We hope you will help us preserve this and refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitlock. I now move across to Ms. Cass, who will speak on behalf of the applicant. 3 minutes, Ms. Cass, in your own time. Thank you.
Thank you. These proposals represent a unique opportunity to revisit the existing established uses at this site, to deliver a planning permission which ensures that your authority gains control of the operation, which is absent under the current permissions. The proposals would secure a significant reduction in the current consented holiday and leisure uses at the site. It would limit the use of the site to 45 lodges and remove the large bar, restaurant, boxing academy, gym and rehabilitation uses. Critically, it will enable you to condition and control the existing current concerns which have been raised by neighbours during the consultation, including lighting, noise and traffic. If these proposals are not approved, the site will continue to benefit from the existing established range of uses which can be operated at the capacities outlined in your committee report. Moreover, given the upturn in the UK staycation market as a result of COVID, the use of camping and caravanning sites has significantly increased and it's predicted that this will continue. Therefore, the current consented position, which places no restrictions on the number of tents or tours, is critical in any comparative consideration of these proposals. Notably, the proposals will remove the noisy bar and restaurant facilities. Access to the site will be electronically controlled, limiting the number of cars entering. Current neon lighting will be replaced with environmentally sensitive alternatives, which have been recently installed in the Peak District National Park's dark sky area. Darwin have also committed to provide routing information and signage to encourage guests to turn right when leaving the site, and your highway authority have no objections. The holding objection from drainage has now been resolved. Therefore, the proposals have been found to be acceptable by all of your technical specialists. The proposals deliver enhancements to the central public footpath and wider landscape and biodiversity across the site. Darwin has an excellent track record for environmental improvement and has been commended by Natural England for delivering a resurgence of the dormouse at their Isle of Wight site. Darwin is passionate and committed to delivering a high-quality holiday scheme at Bleethwood with modern, energy-efficient lodges, investing and revitalising an existing operational tourism facility, delivering 20 new jobs, as well as supporting the local supply chain. Proposals such as this will provide a critical contribution to regenerating the local economy at a time when many other industries are struggling. In conclusion, granting consent for these proposals will ensure that your authority secures a comprehensive planning permission with appropriate conditions to address existing current concerns raised by residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cass, and thank you both for keeping within your 3 minutes. Very good. I will now request that Mrs. Whitlock and Ms. Cass leave the meeting by being put back in the waiting room, but I will remind them that they can watch the live stream of the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. But thank you very much for your input this morning, and good day to you. Right, I believe they both left now. So we move across now to Ward Councillor Stone, who is a local ward member for this item. He is a member of this committee, but as the local ward member for this item, he can speak but does not have a vote. He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. So in your own time, Councillor Stone, please address the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope everyone can hear me. And thank you to all members who attended the site visit, having travelled from one end of Herefordshire to another. Can you all hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can indeed. Thank you, Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much. My thanks to the case officer, Carl Brace, for his very thorough and detailed report and for explaining all the issues so very clearly. The application to include demolition of the existing site buildings and the provision of accommodation in the form of 45 lodges with associated access and parking has aroused strong local feeling and a blizzard of correspondence, both for and against. In fact, a record number of representations. I can't remember so many, having represented the area for 20 years. There are 83 letters of objection, which include concerns regarding potential increased traffic on Bleethwood Lane, concern over drainage, concern over the density and scale of the development, and the claim there will be little benefit to the local economy. There are 119 letters of support, including boosting the local economy, employment opportunities, lodges and improvement over caravans and tents, and there will be minimal disruption. They also say that UK tourism will be promoted. The 45 lodges are also a reduction on the 60 originally proposed, and that I think is welcome. Most of these points, both for and against, have their individual merits, and it's for the committee to decide where the balance lies. Brimfield and Little Hereford Group Parish Council have also objected to this application, and their comments have been read out this morning. They refer in particular to policy BLH18 of the Neighbourhood Development Plan, stating that existing buildings should be reused and also supporting small-scale development. They also say there is plenty of holiday accommodation in the area, including 2 caravan parks in Little Hereford, one of which has been in use for many years, and they question the need for 45 lodges at this site. They assert that the proposal will have an adverse effect on the surrounding infrastructure, especially the local road networks. I do share the concerns of the Parish Council and many local residents over the likelihood of increased traffic volumes in this rural location, a subject covered by Mr. Brace in his presentation. The Transport Manager's comments in 4.5 that the traffic flow on the A456 as recorded is relatively light may possibly refer to a Sunday morning, but members must have noticed the volume and speed of traffic when we stood by the junction yesterday. It is a very difficult right-hand turning from Tenbury Wells with potential for collisions, especially in poor weather conditions. The C1054 Bleethwood Road is also much busier than it appears. It is used as a shortcut between Ludlow and Tenbury, avoiding the notorious Solway Arms junction on the A49. And there's also considerable agricultural traffic using this lane and very few passing areas. This application not only increases car use in the area, but could add to existing dangers, especially at the junction that members visited yesterday. I do not dispute the figures in the report, but I question their interpretation. The proposed site access is to be amended, and I hope this setting back of the hedgerow will be insisted on if planning permission is granted. There is always concern about drainage and sewerage. And as I noted yesterday from the report, I quote, "A foul water and surface water drainage strategy has not been fully detailed at this point in time. There are concerns about phosphate levels in the River Team and surface runoff from the site onto the A456. There is a history of flooding in many sections of the A456, as anyone will notice who drove along the A456 last October or this February during the heavy rainfall. To reach a conclusion with such a wide range of issues to consider, the question is whether the application meets the three objectives of sustainable development, which again, Mr. Brace addressed earlier. On the economic objective, there will be employment opportunities, but with the site so near Shropshire and Worcestershire, I wonder whether our local economy in Herefordshire will benefit very much, as an earlier speaker suggested. The nearest village shop is in Brimfield, over 3 miles away, and a car journey is almost certainly necessary. There are no pavements along the A456. Now, we all support tourism, and I certainly do, but as I said earlier, there are other caravan sites in the area, as well as many bed and breakfasts. We are presently in staycation mode, and of course, lots of people are taking holidays in the UK, but things can and do change, and who knows what may happen in a few years' time. On the social objective, paragraph 6.180 states that planning's social role incorporates providing support to strong, vibrant and healthy communities, end of quote. An admirable sentiment. But how will these lodges and their occupiers be part of the community? They will be here today, gone tomorrow. I fail to see how this development will support sustainable communities. The previous use of the site, with its boxing academy, rehabilitation centre and training facilities for young people, which the owner was widely praised for, provided a much greater social benefit. I hope the holidaymakers will use our local facilities, but this is not necessarily sustainable. On the environmental objective, I applaud the attention in the report to minimizing waste, improving biodiversity, retaining and protecting the orchard, the various landscaping measures, and who knows, we might have dormice on the site and even hedgehogs, Mr. Chairman. But most people will be relying on their private cars, although cycling is being encouraged. There is very little public transport in the area, as the parish council say in their statement. This may be inevitable in a rural area, but should we as a council be supporting this extra car use when we have declared a climate emergency? As paragraph 6.48 states, approval should be given unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. I've explained why I am concerned about the sustainability of this application based on the three objectives and have raised some of the local concerns, particularly over road safety and traffic volumes. But it is for the committee to decide whether these adverse impacts outweigh the benefits. I think the jury is still out. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. We now move into the debate proper. So I'm looking for the first speaker. Nobody's identified themselves as yet, but I've now got Councillor Rowan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On our agenda 6.46, it states, as he goes to it and looks, the site has evolved over time and benefits from planning permission, allowing the site to be used for 60 touring caravans, 100 tents, 6 statics, and 8 glamping pods. Sorry about that, everyone. I think one of our speakers did say that that wasn't the case. Could somebody clarify if it is actually, confirm those figures? I don't know if it's something Mr. Brace can do.
I call upon Mr. Brace if you could confirm.
The speakers talked about caravan licenses, which are of course a completely different matter to planning permissions. A bit like you can have planning permission but not listed building consent. You can have planning permission but not the requisite caravan license. So the figures, as far as I am reasonably aware, presented to you in terms of the existing scale of development on site is accurate.
Okay.
If that helps.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brace. Did you want to add anything else, Councillor Rowan?
No, that's all. That was reading through. For me, it's established use, so I will be going with officer recommendation on this one.
Okay, thank you. I move to Councillor Foxton, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for another really interesting site visit. Now, whilst every application has both favourable and questionable features, this type of country park lodges is completely new to me. We do need to encourage and invite tourism for local economy growth. And surprisingly for myself, I can see several plus points. We need tourism. The lodges are static but can be moved. And it'll be just motor vehicles coming to and forth, no caravans manoeuvring round, no noisy clubhouse, no bar. The site location is not overbearing, and the application aspires to invite high quality tourist accommodation, providing cultural and leisure activities, for example, walking, cycling, pursuit of heritage routes, and visiting heritage sites, and also the joy of tranquility. This accommodation has the potential to support our beleaguered hospitality industry, to improve matters. There's the highway implication. Can I suggest signs indicating the junction and turning points and speed restrictions? There already exists a very wide bell mouth at the road junction onto the A456, which is interesting, but lends itself for improvement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foxton. Move to Councillor Milne, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want a little bit of further clarification from the presenting case officer, if I may, on the subject of the existing assets, environmental assets. And I appreciate, for example, that the orchard, which is a listed priority on the habitat inventory, is being appropriately protected, or appear to be. The question of the railway, the southern border of the site infringes upon the relict Bewdley-Tenbury-Wolverton railway line, which has not apparently been mentioned, at least not in this presentation so far. I'm aware that the railway doesn't actually cross the application site, but it would certainly, I would suggest, merit some consideration. And finally, land classification, agricultural land classification. Is that, am I right in thinking that's grade 2, best and most productive land? So those are two questions on assets. Another further question, if I may, on the size of the certainly the 5-bed, the two 5-bed accommodation units, still defined as caravans, if they're 20 meters by 6.8 meters, and they have to be in no more than 2 sections. I would suggest I maybe misunderstood this completely, but moving a section that would therefore be 10 meters by 6.8 meters along the road might not be a great idea. I don't know whether in practical terms such a large unit is movable and therefore still falls within the term of a caravan. So if you could clarify that, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've got 3 questions there. Mr. Brace, if you'd like to address those, please.
I'll take the railway one first. Obviously, I'm well aware of the railway in the site. If you run past Bleaford Way on the 456, a short distance along, you can see the remnants of significant railway infrastructure that's long gone. In terms of the assessment of the site, nothing was raised by the Conservation Officer, and obviously, as alluded to, the railways have didn't cross the site. So in terms of that there's considered to be no to negligible impact on that that asset, such that it is. In terms of the agricultural land classification, I didn't look this one up simply because the site isn't in agricultural use. It has a tourist use across the site. You see the planning permissions and planning history before you. So it's not the loss of a greenfield site in the normal terms, in terms of how you were concerned about the Maryvale Lane, for example. This is a site that is already in a tourism and economic use. From looking at the West Midlands land classification map last night, though, most of Herefordshire is grade 3 outside, apart from the urban areas, or slightly better. So I can get that precise detail if you so wish, but I'm from memory and just looking at the map in general, it would be grade 3, which is good to moderate, or grade 2. As I say, do be mindful of what is the existing lawful uses of the site. And in terms of the caravans, the units, whether they're a 1-bed unit or a 5-bed unit, as long as they meet the size specification laid down in legislation of what constitutes a caravan, that's basically what matters. And yes, you're right, some of these caravans at the most extreme can be rather large, but as also the legal definition confirms, these can be moved in 2 parts and transported on a trailer. And if that trailer is connected to a large lorry, then that still does not preclude it from being and meeting the definition of a caravan. So caravans can be large, they can be small, they just have to fit within that legislative definition. So as I say, whether it's a 1-bed unit or a 5-bed unit, as long as it's within those thresholds, it meets with the legislative definition. I hope that provides the clarity, but willing to expand further if necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. I think that answers your questions fully. Councillor Milne, did you want to come back on anything?
Not at this stage, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Move to Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. An earlier speaker, I think the lady who was speaking in opposition to the proposal, mentioned at least 2 other sites with numbers of caravans, and was suggesting that there would be a surfeit of supply around there. Now, I appreciate that the planning officer, like this committee, is constrained to looking at the application in front of us, but I would just like to ask the planning officer, Mr. Brace, were other locally available lodge sites part of his consideration in his recommendation? Thank you.
Mr. Brace.
Thank you, Chairman. No, they're not, for this simple and brutally blunt reason. It's not relevant. Obviously, we operate in a market economy, and it is the quality of the offer that dictates whether, in most cases, a business is successful or not. So there will be other facilities both within the county, relatively close to the site, and also outside the county, close to the site, in the Tenbury area, for example. However, the market dictates, as we know, and also I would suggest if someone is willing to make this sort of investment, they must have some sort of confidence in the market, and also confidence in Herefordshire as being a desirable destination where they can run a profitable and viable business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brace. I think that answers
Thank you, Mr. Brace.
the question well. Councillor Polly Andrews, please.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. And the site visit was most interesting. I would have to say I've stayed at similar establishments elsewhere, usually on the continent, but they're all extremely well run. Much has been made about being car-based. One of my observations when I've stayed elsewhere has been how many people come with bicycles attached to their cars and then spend their time cycling around rather than using their cars. However, this type of accommodation and holidays, as has already been said, is increasingly popular and will support the local towns, whether they're in Shropshire or in Herefordshire. We need to support all of our local towns. There will be no cafe or restaurant or entertainment, so I'm sure that the people who will stay there will patronise the local restaurants, drinking establishments, which can only be to the good. These sites, in my own experience, are usually very well run and attract people who, how shall I phrase this tactfully, behave themselves. And I'm happy to support the application.
Right, so that is a proposal for approval of this application, Councillor Andrews?
I'm happy to move approval.
Okay, fine, thank you. Have we a seconder, please, for that proposal? Councillor Foxton, thank you. Now move to Councillor Wilding, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think on reflection, I'd probably support this, providing the development is as sustainable as they possibly can make it. And I know they have said various things about heat source pumps. I think they should consider having some electric charging points in their car park, possibly a bicycle hire facility on site. But other than that, Mrs. Whitlock said some very compelling things against it, but I think on reflection, I'll have to support this one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilding. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we're going to see more and more of this type of applications in the county and throughout the country as a whole. If we're serious about changes following climate change and the situation in the airline businesses, more and more people will want to, and hopefully will, be holidaying in the UK. And if that is to happen, which is a plus from the environment point of view, we need to encourage and provide the facilities to enable them to do that. And I can't see any planning reason why we can refuse this, so I shall be supporting it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. I've got no further speakers registered. Does anybody wish to come in at this late time? No. I move across to Mr. Bishop then to make some comments before I go back to the ward councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Another excellent debate. Members picking up the key factors again relating to the existing use of the land as identified by the officer in the report and the sustainable nature of the development as proposed by the application. Councillor Milne has identified the non-designated heritage asset being the former railway line, and obviously you will weigh that in the balance. The officer has identified there is no impact on that facility, but as it's a non-designated heritage asset, it's adjacent to the site. You will weigh that in the balance with in your decision making that you will do on this particular application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. We now move across to the vote. We have tabled. Sorry.
Councillor Stone.
My apologies, Councillor Stone. I invite you to sum up the debate, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I sum up the debate, could I just raise one point I'm rather concerned about, and that is the fact that I was under the impression that the group parish council submission would be read out at the meeting. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I was under the impression that they were sending in a statement to be read out. I'm sorry if that wasn't the case, but I feel I must raise it, as I was under the impression that that's what they were going to do. But could we just have clarity on this, Chairman, please?
Certainly. Can I just ask Mr. Brown if he could confirm whether he received any submission from the parish council or not?
I don't believe that I've received a submission, Chairman.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I raised that matter right at the end, but I was expecting it to happen. As it didn't, I feel I must ask the question simply because somebody may well ask me after the meeting. But thank you very much. To summarise the debate, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank all members for their comments. I think it's been a very interesting debate, and it brought an interesting insight into all the issues. And it just shows the value of site visits, that having travelled from one end of Herefordshire to another, members had an opportunity to have a really good look around the site yesterday. Well, on the one hand, Mr. Chairman, tourism will be encouraged by this application, and there will be employment benefits for those who are employed to work on the site, and there will be economic benefits, whether it's to Herefordshire, Shropshire or Worcestershire, there will be benefits. Also, I agree that the use of the site will be regularised. There has been a lot of piecemeal development there in the past, some very good development, some not so good, but the use of the site will be regularised if this application is improved. But on the other hand, there is the policy E4 of the core strategy about large-scale developments focusing on Hereford and the market towns. And here we have quite a large development in open countryside, almost, Mr. Chairman, a village within a village. But nevertheless, I don't feel it necessarily conforms to policy E4. Also, there's policy BLH 18 in the local neighbourhood development plan, that this is not a small-scale development. And the local neighbourhood development plan has been used quite extensively in this document, which I'm very pleased about, but some of the policies in the plan certainly don't support the 45 lodges development. There remain concerns over traffic and road safety. I know people say this about virtually every application, but those of you who visited the site will know what I mean. And local people are certainly very concerned about traffic movements, even though there won't be the caravans, there'll still be a lot of extra vehicles on both the A456 and the C1054. So to conclude, I'm still not entirely convinced these 45 lodges represent sustainable development. And I've been through the 3 objectives of sustainable development in some detail. As a local member, I've highlighted the concerns of both the group parish council and the concerns of many local residents. So I leave members to decide whether or not the adverse impacts are outweighed by the benefits. As I said, Chairman, a moment ago, I'm still not convinced, even though the planning officer and many members put forward a very good case. But with bearing in mind the history of the site, I do feel the sustainability is an issue which does need to be taken into account when you decide how you're going to determine this application. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. And I apologise for nearly missing you out.
Not at all.
We now move to the vote. Can I remind members of the committee that you can only vote on this application before the committee if you've been present for the whole of the presentation of and discussion on the application. Does anybody need to advise me that they're not permitted to vote? I don't think so. So can I actually ask the Democratic Services whether the electronic voting system is ready, and to confirm the number of eligible voting committee members there are for this poll. So the vote is for the application to be approved as per the officer's recommendation.
So,
as to-
Chairman, we have 12 eligible members voting, and they can vote now.
Okay, thank you. The application was moved by Councillor Polly Andrews and seconded by Councillor Foxton. So if you could all vote now, please.
Okay, Chair, all votes are in. 10 members have voted in favour and 2 have voted against.
Okay, fine, thank you. So that application is passed for approval. Thank you, members, for all your input on that application. Mr. Brace will be presenting our third application today. So just to allow a little bit of breathing space between the applications, we will have a further 10-minute adjournment. So that we'll come back at just turned.
Chair, I don't think you heard the voiceover.
You're muted, Jen.
Yes, Chair, we're live.
Oh. Sorry. That was me without my earphones in. Right, we all make mistakes. Right, I'd like to welcome you all back to the start of or the continuation of our meeting following the adjournment. I request, please, that the public speakers for item 8 attending as virtual attendees, Mrs. Davis on behalf of Colwell Parish Council and Mr. Baggett, the applicant's agent, are admitted to the meeting. I believe they are both with us now. Could you both confirm that you're able to hear, please? Mrs. Davis, you're muted.
Good afternoon, Councillor. Yes, I'm present and correct.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Baggett?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can hear you. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Good afternoon to you both. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting, and we'll call upon you to speak following the officer's presentation on the application before us. So item 8 on the agenda, our third application today, land off Mill Lane, Colwell. This is an outline application for residential development with all matters reserved except for access for up to 37 dwellings. We have 3 speakers on this application. I've already welcomed Mrs. Davis and Mr. Baggett, and I will call upon them to speak following the officer's presentation on the application. Planning officer again for this application, Mr. Carl Brace, and the local member who is a member of this committee, Councillor Tony Johnson. He stands aside in his capacity as ward councillor for this application and therefore will not get a vote. So without further ado, I call upon Councillor Mr. Carl Brace to make the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and members. We're nearly there. You haven't got to put up with me for much longer today, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. Members recall site visit yesterday to Colwell. Always a pleasure to go there. One of the most beautifully located villages, as I said, not just in Herefordshire, but probably in the country. Always a privilege to go to that part of the county. As we can see here on the plan, Colwell and the site is identified by the red star. Just for the avoidance of doubt, Colwell is identified in the core strategy under policy RA2 as a settlement where development is directed outside of Hereford and the market towns. Everything on the plan before you is located within the Malvern Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. Consideration is therefore given to the aims and objectives of the Malvern Hills A1B management plan when assessing any proposals. As said, the site is denoted by the red star, and further to yesterday's site visit, the plan demonstrates a number of key points relevant to your assessment of this application. Firstly, you can see how Colwell has developed as a linear settlement following Warwin Road, which runs through it. How the site and beyond is a dramatic and instant change to open, undeveloped countryside. The road network north and west of the site, which some of you did experience yesterday, are a mix of C and unclassified roads linking to Ledbury, Wellington Heath, Bosbury and Cradley. Members of this committee will no doubt recall when the viaduct site at Ledbury was debated and was assessed, the importance placed upon these being quiet rural roads and the tranquility they offer, and the tranquility being a value of the AONB and one of its key characteristics. The application, as Chairman said, is an outline application for 37 dwellings, and officers have assessed the proposal to represent major development. I will return to the importance of this in my summary, and I'll just park that matter there now, but headline it for the avoidance of doubt that that is what is before you. If we can turn to slide 2, please. The plan shows the site edge red, and members will note its location next to the new primary school. The aerial picture shows quite dramatically the change from village form to open countryside around Colwell, and the lack of any transitional zone between the village and its countryside in this area. For information, the agricultural land classification of the site is grade 3, good to moderate. We can go to slide 3, please. At the risk of belabouring the point, however, mindful members' determination will fall primarily on consideration of landscape impact, impact on the setting of Colwell, and impact on the AONB against housing delivery and wider sustainability. The site shows once again, but in more detail, the site against its locational context. It is inescapable in terms of locational sustainability. The site is ideally placed. It's clearly adjacent to key facilities, namely the primary school and village hall, and it's absolutely a matter of fact the site is within walking distance to all other facilities Colwell offers. If we can turn to slide 4, please. Whilst the application is in outline of all matters reserved except access, an illustrative layout has been provided, and again is very helpful. What the indicative layout shows is the quantum of development can be provided on site, whilst also delivering on-site open space, landscaping, drainage and other infrastructure. The density of development as regard to context and the requirement to facilitate open space and landscaping equates to a low density of 13.7 dwellings per hectare. At face value, this is a low density development. However, it's a density informed by its context. We can turn to slide 5, please. The connectivity plan with the site edge red illustrates a number of points outlined to members on the site visit. The green dashed lines show the adjacent public rights-of-way network around the site and surrounding area. The turquoise area shows upgrades to the width and surfacing of the public right-of-way the development would bring forward. The purple annotation at the south highlights a new footpath that would serve the development from its access point, passing the village hall and connecting to where the current footpath ends near the Warwin Road Junction. The site is clearly sustainably located and facilitates and promotes local trips by foot through these enhancements. I also just highlight the linear parallel lines running from the southeast corner of the map before you. This is the railway line from Hereford to Birmingham, and just in case some members may not be aware, Colwell has a railway station. Members will note following the applicant's collaboration with the Transportation Department and officers, amended plans have been provided, and as a result there are no objections from the Transportation Manager in respect of the proposals. If we can turn to slide 6, please. Further to the previous slide, here we have the access arrangements in greater detail. The site is served by a new vehicular access point with a 59-metre visibility display in both directions. Southeast of the site, the carriageway would be widened to 4.1 metres and a new 2-metre wide footpath installed connecting to where the existing footpath ends, as shown by the black hatched areas on the area sort of southeast on that plan. Further to the Highways Authority having no objection, officers also consider the wider sustainable transport requirements of core strategy policy MT1 are satisfied. If we can turn to slide 7, please. Colwell has an emerging neighbourhood development plan, which is at its examination stage. The examiner's report is due imminently and is literally could arrive any moment, and we are awaiting that. Within the NDP, it defines a settlement boundary as shown on the left with a black line around the form of Colwell, and also allocates sites for housing development. These are shown with the yellow annotations. However, due to the stage where the NDP currently is at and the nature of objections received, having regard to paragraph 48 of the NPPF, moderate weight is afforded to the NDP's policies. However, Notwithstanding that moderate weight, the NDP is underpinned by a landscape sensitivity and character assessment undertaken by a qualified and experienced practitioner. This is a body of work that has merit in its own right, and the professional who did this assessment has made representations at recent public inquiries regarding the viaduct site and the Laden Dimmock Road site at Ledbury, where their adverse impact upon the setting of this AONB was a refusal reason that was sought to be defended. So just for context, the professional that wrote this is a credible person with the highest level of experience really you can have. The assessment details how development of Mill Lane is inappropriate in landscape terms. Members' attention is drawn to the landscape objections from all of the following bodies: Colwell Parish Council, the Malvern Hills Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Unit, the Council's own landscape officer, and local residents. The Groves End allocation within the NDP, which has been referenced by objectors, for members' reference, is the site denoted yellow to the northeast of the red star on that plan on the left. The site before members today that we are assessing and will be determining is outside the proposed defined settlement boundary, and as such there is a presumption against development here by both the NDP and Core Strategy Policy RA2, where there is an NDP policy RA2 defers to that NDP in terms of where development is acceptable. If we can go to slide 8, please. Turn into some site photographs. This is a view over the site towards Colwell School and the Malvern Hills as one approaches down Mill Lane towards the village. This photo was taken back in February, before the world changed. And if we turn to slide 9, we see views over the site with the top two pictures showing the northwest boundary of the site. Bottom left is a view up Mill Lane over the site towards its western boundary, and bottom right is a view over the site from the existing field gate access. From these pictures so far, the intervisibility and relationship in the Malvern Hills is very, very clear. And if we turn to slide 10, yes, thank you. This shows a panoramic view over the site from the existing field gate access, where we inspected the site on the members' visit yesterday. And of course, as always, around Colwell, the Malvern Hills are ever present. If we can go to slide 11, please. And finally, we have another view over the site towards the school with the Malvern Hills beyond. And if I can go to slide 12, please. The most important slide is the final slide and shows the view towards Colwell from the Malvern Hills themselves. And the site is picked out for you with the red arrow. The linear form of Colwell following Warwind Road and prevented from encroaching towards the hills by the railway is both evident and a characteristic of the village and this landscape. Turning to the application site, from the hills we can readily identify the incursion development would make in the landscape and out of character with the prevailing historic landscape and settlement character. The development, due to topography and vegetation, would stand out and be prominent and appear separate from the existing main built form from the hills. This picture really shows how the landscape capacity assessment is in officers' mind correct to identify development here as harmful and the landscape to have a low capacity to assimilate new developments within this landscape view and setting. To summarise the application, the NPPF at paragraph 172 is explicit that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in areas of outstanding natural beauty, which members will be aware have the highest status of protection in relation to these landscape issues. The NPPF sets out the scale and extent of development within these designated areas should be limited, and the NPPF explicitly states planning permission should be refused for major development other than exceptional circumstances where it can be demonstrated that development is in the public interest. Consideration of such applications should include an assessment of, firstly, the need for the development, including the terms of any national considerations and the impact permitting it or refusing it upon the local economy. Secondly, the cost of and scope for developing outside the designated area or meeting the need for it in some other way. And thirdly, any detrimental effect on the environment, the landscape and recreational opportunities, and the extent to which that could be moderated. At the start, I stated officers conclude the proposal represents major development with an AONB, and as set out in the recommendation, concludes refusal as the decision. Whilst legislation defines major development as residential proposals over 10 units for a site in excess of 1 hectare, the NPPF, unhelpfully, does not set any parameters and leaves the definition of major development to the decision maker, which obviously today his planning committee. Regard, however, is to be had to the nature, scale and setting, where there could be an adverse impact on the purposes for which the area has been designated or defined. Based on the scale and setting of the proposals and adverse impact on the character and appearance of the AONB identified as set out in the report, officers conclude the development is major development. Of the 3 exceptions referenced under paragraph 172, as previously mentioned, and taking them in turn, with regards to the need for the development, including in terms of any national considerations and impact of permitting or refusing this upon the local economy, officers conclude there is no national need consideration applicable, and locally it is clear from the NDP and the landscape capacity assessment other sites can come forward at Colwell to deliver housing hereabouts. Taking into account the cost of and scope for developing outside the designated area or meeting the need for it in some other way, it is noted Colwell is within the Ledbury housing market area. And along with sites of Colwell considered acceptable in landscape terms, it is considered there is ample opportunity for housing for this part of the county to be delivered on acceptable sites, both within and outside of the Malvern Hills AONB. No employed cost disbenefit therefore applies. And turning to the third criterion of any detrimental effect on the environment, the landscape and recreational opportunities, and the extent to which that could be moderated, officers conclude the harm is significant and adverse to the very qualities which contribute to the AONB's special qualities and characteristics. Impacts beyond the visual could include loss of tranquility, an identified characteristic of the AONB, especially on the unclassified roads which also serve walkers, cyclists and horse riders. The recreational and tourism qualities would potentially be harmed. As evidence from the picture of the hills before you of the site, the landscape impact could not be moderated as the development represents a new and discordant encroachment into open countryside at odds with the historic landscape and settlement pattern. Accordingly, officers consider refusal is unavoidable based on the clear government steer from the NPPF. Notwithstanding that, and having regards to the 3 objectives of sustainable development, I have considered the economic, social and environmental weight that could be attributed to the proposal. The proposal could help to support economic growth arising from employment and supply of associated materials and goods and services during construction of the development, support to local services and facilities arising from the new resident population. However, the positive economic benefits arising from the scheme are not unique to this application proposal and arise to varying degrees of magnitude on the heavy housing development there is. As such, I attach moderate weight to these benefits. The proposal would, however, provide a suitable range for mixer housing as required by core strategy policies H1 and RA1. I attach significant weight to this issue given the scale of development and clear policy requirements and housing need shortfall the county has, especially and including affordable housing delivery and how this proposal would help address those matters. The weight attached is further increased due to the council's lack of an up-to-date 5-year housing land supply and its affordable housing delivery performance. I do, however, note the proposal would represent conflict with the emerging neighbourhood development plan, which is at an advanced stage in its examination. NDPs, as members are well aware, are the result of significant time and energy put in by local communities, and officers consider to go against a plan so advanced could undermine public confidence and future engagement in the planning process. That said, I do take into account the level of objections to the NDP, which focus on the exclusion of this site and the inclusion of another allocated site, and as such I only attribute moderate weight to this matter. Whilst located in walking and cycling proximity to local services and facilities, and having public transport options for longer journeys available by train, as detailed, there are a number of ways the environmental policies of the core strategy and the NPPF are satisfied. The proposed development, however, provides harm to the environmental role, specifically regarding adverse landscape impacts and harm upon a protected landscape. As identified, the proposal represents major development in a designated area, and on the basis of the significant adverse impact on landscape character, appearance, and the historic setting of Colwell, substantial harm is caused to the designated protected landscape asset. As such, the environmental aims and objectives of core strategy policies RA2, LD1 and LD4, and the emerging NDP are not satisfied, and there is also clear conflict with NPPF paragraphs 11 and 172. And as a consequence of that, also the Countryside and Rights of Way Act. I attach significant weight to this harm. The potential benefits, therefore, are considered to be not as such that they would outweigh the identified conflict with the local development plan and NPPF paragraph 172, and overall harm to designated landscape protected by legislation, to which officers consider significant weight must be attributed. As such, Refusal is recommended. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brace. We now move across to our public speakers this morning, today rather. And we start with Mrs. Davis, Clerk to Colwell Parish Council. You have 3 minutes to make your representation, starting in your own time. Thank you, Mrs. Davis. You're muted at the moment.
Thank you, councillors.
Okay,
As
thank you.
councillors will be aware, the Colwood Neighbourhood Development Plan is predicated on a landscape sensitivity and character assessment due to the parish being wholly in and surrounded by the Malvern Hills AONB. This is in line with the NPPF paragraph 176, which sets out that the great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in national parks, the Broads and areas of outstanding natural beauty. I am pleased to be able to update the councillors on the progress of the Colwood Neighbourhood Development Plan, which has significant bearing on this application. After 7 years and some £36,000, our plan has finally reached the examination stage. This is after various amendments to the original plan, the most significant of which was the building of a new primary school adjacent to the site you are considering in Mill Lane. Originally, part of this plan had been allocated for up to 21 houses, but the landowner chose to sell that part of this site to Herefordshire Council for the new primary school, resulting in the parish council having to find an alternative site for those 21 dwellings. Since this plan application was considered by the parish council in January, and our objections submitted, which were based on the fact that this land is considered to be wholly unacceptable for development due to its high sensitivity within the AONB, our plan has now progressed through Regulation 15/16 and reached the examination stage. By late August, the examiner had completed her initial review of our plan and submitted a set of 18 questions, which comprised of largely minor matters. These have all been addressed by the two authorities and are available for viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. None of the points raised appear to be unduly concerning, and those questions asked do not raise any significant or major concerns about the content, or more importantly, the evidence base of the Colwood Neighbourhood Development Plan. On the basis of the above, it is safe to assume the examiner wholly accepts the Colwood Landscape Sensitivity and Character Assessment and the two sites which we have identified for development in Colwood, namely the former primary school site comprising of up to 9 houses and another site, Grovesend Farm, comprising of up to 32 houses, which will enable the parish to meet its allocated housing target. We are delighted that the examiner will shortly publish her report, and we hope that with the additional information I have provided you with today, this will give you the confidence to support Colwood Parish Council objections and refuse this application. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Davis. We've now got a video from Mr. Denham Vaughan, who is a local resident and an objector to this application, which will be played for you now. Thank you.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak to you as a resident of Colwood, and to tell you why I'm objecting to application 200156, which is the proposal to build 37 new houses on agricultural land adjacent to Mill Lane in the village of Colwood. My primary objection is one of local democracy. As you will know, our local Colwood Parish Council has spent nearly 10 years developing the Colwood Neighbourhood Development Plan, which has been specifically drawn up to minimise the adverse effects of new builds on Colwood Village, which is within the area of outstanding natural beauty. The plan has been drafted in extensive consultation with the local population of the parish and includes an assessment of those suitable sites, as well as a way forward to achieve the government target of 176 new dwellings. This proposal falls outside of the plan and indeed outside of the agreed settlement boundary. And I believe it's for that reason that Colwood Parish Council have strongly objected to this development. I believe the parish council, our local parish council, is uniquely placed both as residents of the village, which gives them local knowledge, and also as a council, which gives them an overall view, an umbrella view of the best places to develop. So if the proposal goes ahead, I believe it will send out a strong message that Herefordshire County Council is prepared to disregard local neighbourhood development plans, to disregard the views and objections of the local parish council, as well as the wishes of the local population of Colwall. And I believe this goes strongly against the expressed value of the council for the principle of local democracy. One further consideration is the total lack of infrastructure, such as nearby shops, pubs, recreational facilities, that 37 new families moving into the outskirts of the village might reasonably require. Now, if this sets a precedent and building is allowed to go ahead outside of the neighbourhood development plan, then I believe within a few years these shops, pubs, etc. will be built probably, but this will have a serious effect on the character of the village and a deleterious effect on the beauty of this part of the Malverns, which is, after all, within the area of outstanding natural beauty.
Okay, thank you. So that was representation from Mr. Denham Vaughan. I now invite Mr. Baggett, who is the applicant's agent, to voice his support for this application. You have 3 minutes, please, Mr. Baggett.
Thank you, Chairman, members. This is a deliverable and sustainable development which has generated significant levels of local support in a location that your officer report confirms is appropriate for residential development in locational terms. The council, as you know, cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land as is required under paragraph 73 of the National Planning Policy Framework. The council's housing land supply figure has fallen to just 3.69 years as of April 2020. Furthermore, as your officer report states, the shortfall in affordable housing provision since 2011-12 is, and I quote, enormous, with just 19% of the overall target provided. Against this backdrop, the housing policies of the adopted core strategy must be treated as being out of date, and paragraph 11 of the NPPF is therefore engaged, with the overall planning balance starting from what is often referred to as a tilted position in favour of this sustainable housing development. Assessment of impact upon the Malvern Hills AONB is of course necessary, but any adverse impact upon the Malvern Hills themselves would, it is suggested, be limited. In any event, starting from the aforementioned tilted position in favour of the development, any perceived adverse impact is considered insufficient to shift the overall planning balance against the proposed development. The indicative layout which accompanies the application demonstrates that a green space in landscape-led development is achievable, which will help to assimilate the development into the landscape and its surroundings, whilst providing a soft edge to the village. Policy SS2 of the core strategy states that in the rural areas, new housing development will be acceptable where it helps to meet housing needs and requirements, supports the rural economy and local services and facilities, and is responsive to the needs of its community. And paragraph 3.46 of the core strategy recognises that in Herefordshire, there is a long-standing evidence that housing on non-allocated sites such as this has made a significant contribution to meeting housing needs and requirements, and this has been a major element of new housing provision in your rural areas. It is the case that the proposed development will bring with it significant benefits to Colwall and the community by supporting existing shops and services and public transport, delivering a quality mix of much needed affordable and market housing to meet local needs, and improving existing facilities through a suite of Section 106 contributions which are summarised at paragraph 6.85 of your officer report. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Biggott. So if I now request that Mrs. Davis and Mr. Baggott leave the meeting by being put back in the waiting room, I'd like to remind them that they can watch the live stream of this meeting on the council's YouTube channel. So thank you very much for your input and a good day to you. Right, we now move across to Ward Councillor for this application. As previously stated, Councillor Johnson is a member of this committee, but he stands aside in his capacity as Ward member to actually address the committee, and therefore will not get a vote on this application. So in your own time, please, Councillor Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I begin by thanking Carl Brace in particular for the work he's done on this and his thorough examination and preparation of his report, and Karen Davis from Cornwall Parish Council for all the work that I know that she and her colleagues have done in the preparation of the NDP. But I begin what I have to say by making this observation, which I ask you to bear in mind during your debate. Cornwall, although in the AONB, entirely in the AONB, has a housing target. That's not mitigated by being in the AONB. We have to build more houses. And when you look at the spaces available, all the sites within Cornwall are necessarily within the AONB, and wherever else you go, if you refuse Mill Lane, all the other sites will have similar impact on the AONB. And having looked at the responses of this application, the responses made during the consultations on the draft NDP, it is clear that for reasons I will cover, Mill Lane is clearly the most practical of those sites available for Cornwall's needs. To begin with, in 2012, Herefordshire undertook a strategic land availability assessment, referred to as the SLAR. And that SLAR clearly identified that the land at Mill Lane is suitable for development. It also made equally clear that the alternative, which is now in the NDP, Gravesend, is not suitable for development, noting that the local road network would not sustain intensification of use. The access road to it is only 4 meters wide in total, and so it's impossible for a car or a bike to pass without extreme caution. There's no room for provision of a footpath, and therefore that site is effectively undeliverable. It's also notable that Gravesend is within the Cornwall Conservation Area and right next to 3 listed buildings, all part of the historic setting of Cornwall, which Carl Brace has already said they seek to preserve. In 2015, a draft NDP prepared by the Parish Council included Mill Lane, and the slide presented to the village at that meeting stated that Mill Lane, based on a detailed landscape assessment, was medium to high in its capacity to absorb development without undue damage to the AONB. The village substantially supported this site in the consultation. The same landscape officer involved in that draft now says, with a curious explanation which I will cover later, that the site should now not be built on. So the main objections to this application are based on the emerging NDP, which, following the landscape officer's change of mind, caused the Parish Council to amend its NDP to include Gravesend and to oppose Mill Lane in direct opposition to the Hereford SLAR. It is therefore comes down to considering which is the most reliable basis upon which to make a decision. It's either the Hereford SLAR, the original Parish Council choice, and all the other important factors, including the overwhelming view of the villagers, which is positive for Mill Lane, or the entirely subjective landscape assessment, which has not only changed since 2015, but totally ignores other important factors like vehicle access, pedestrian access, the conservation area, and the view of local villages. The community support for Mill Lane is an important aspect for your consideration. Every time the village was asked for its opinion, it appears to have been ignored. Consultation, I agree, does not necessarily mean agreement with or compliance with, but where a majority opinion is to be ignored, a coherent explanation at least ought to be provided, and to date, none has. For the current application of Mill Lane, for your information, members, there are 76 letters of support, including the trustees of the neighbouring village hall, and 26 letters of objection. The parish council is one of the objectors, stating that the application contravenes the NDP. But as you have been reminded, the NDP is not yet adopted and cannot be afforded full weight. It's a draft document still waiting sign off, and the village referendum, which will be in May of next year. And if you look at the 3 other consultations held on the NDP, that's a process in which the village should have a major voice in deciding where development takes place. In every one of them, the views of the village are constant and opposed to the direction the plan has taken since 2015. The 2015 NDP consultation asked specific questions. They asked for the people's views on Mill Lane as a site for housing. And it's worth noting, 65 supported it and 7 objected. They were then asked for their opinion on Mill Lane as a site for school plus housing. 82 supported it and 8 objected. They were asked for their opinion on Gravesend as a site for a school. 6 supported and 56 objected. The NDP consultation changed Mill Lane for Gravesend. And when you look at the reference numbers for each response regarding the change of site, what you find is that 17 responses supported the inclusion of Gravesend and 94 responses objected to the draft NDP. If you look at the 2020 NDP consultation, representations were produced in full and show as follows. There were 2 responses in support of the draft NDP, and one of those was from the agent for Gravesend, and 78 responses objected to the current draft NDP. And the differences between the 2015 NDP and all subsequent versions are almost entirely on opinions about landscape. And it is that I now turn. Landscape assessment is an important process, especially in an AONB as Cornwall is. However, landscape assessment is not capable of precise measurement and must necessarily be a subject of opinion. It is also only one aspect of the suitability of a site. In this case, it seems to be the only consideration, and the fact is that Holwell must provide more homes, and wherever a development is located, it will have adverse impact. While we want to minimize that impact and ensure development is sensitive, new housing is very much needed, and where a decision is in the balance, we have to ask ourselves a number of questions, including what is important to the people who already live here, as well as whether that development will spoil the view for walkers on the hills. Now, the view from the hills, as shown in the last photograph from the officer, is taken from at least a mile away. If you look at the photograph I sent around, you'll see what I mean. The visual impact study done for the NDP grades Mill Lane and Gravesend areas as having exactly the same impact. And it cannot be held, therefore, that the walkers' views are more seriously affected by the choice of either. Mill Lane is a very suitable site in every respect. Development here has been well supported by the village throughout, and it's clear that relying so heavily on what can never be more than a subjective landscape assessment alone is not a sound basis for making a decision. And although Mill Lane was originally approved by the Shire and the parish council as a site for a school, once the school was built, the landscape architect who was involved from the very start took the view that the school now presents a hard edge to the village and that no further housing should be built there. Much of the opposition to Mill Lane application and the changes in the Cornwall draft NDP are based on the work of a landscape architect between 2013 and 19, and this highly subjective change of heart has led to the reassessment of Mill Lane and apparently all subsequent decisions by the parish council regarding sites in the village. Over-reliance has been placed on these reports in representations objecting to Mill Lane, leaving the parish council and our own planners in a most difficult position. Other practical factors like car access, pedestrian access, avoiding the conservation area, etc., and the village's common sense approach clearly should outweigh a landscape opinion on its own. Of particular relevance here is that in 2013, the landscape assessment rated areas 10 and 11 in Cornwall as having the lowest capacity for development. Herefordshire Council, having properly considered all factors, correctly overrode the landscape assessment and approved the replacing of a thatched cottage with a large house, plus 9 new homes in area 10, and a further 9 new homes in area 11, all since 2017. And so clearly Herefordshire did not think that landscape was sacrosanct at that time. In the case of Mill Lane, they seem to suggest that landscape is the primary consideration. And in fairness to the architect, the landscape October 19 submission for Reg 16 clearly states, and you should note, at 2.2.18, the suitability of a site for development in terms of access, proximity to, and or capacity of public services was not taken into consideration in either stage 1 or stage 2, as it was beyond the scope of the commission. If you then turn to the draft NDP, the report before you today includes reference to the landscape architect's comments in her conclusion, and this is potentially or could be misleading. Her comments include the development in Mill Lane is, and I quote, contrary to the ambitions of the local community as set out in the Cornwall NDP. And that comment has also gone to the NDP examiner for consideration. Now, this is clearly nonsense. The architect has either not seen the consultation results or has ignored them and should not simply assume that the draft NDP reflects community ambition, because it clearly does not. Just remember the numbers that I've just read out to you about consultation results. The draft NDP may be a plan for the village, but it most certainly is not a plan from the villagers. Visual impact. A significant part of the landscape assessment objections regard visual impact, and today's proposal would indeed have some visual impact to and from the hills, as would all other sites. However, Mill Lane is still part of the built form of the village. It does support its linear nature along the main road and would not stand out as an anomalous development. Note that a village-wide impact visual study, a village-wide visual impact study was performed as part of the Cornwall NDP. This gave the land at Mill Lane the same visual impact rating as the land at Grove's End. So a choice cannot be made on visual impact alone. In summary, there are 2 large sites of similar capacity apparently available and several smaller ones. Some of these have to be developed if Cornwall is to meet its minimum target. The recommendation before you today, and the only one you should consider, is Mill Lane, and it is recommended that you refuse it. However, the corollary to that is to approve others in due course as per the amended NDP, or totally ignore and miss Colwall's housing target. The case against Mill Lane is based almost entirely on a landscape assessment, which has not only been changed on a challengeable basis, but which completely ignores any other equally important factors, including the view of villagers. I do not envy the Parish Council or our officers the problems caused by this highly subjective and flexible assessment. And an example of this subjective flexibility is that permission has recently been granted for one replacement and 3 new houses in Mill Lane, exactly where we were standing yesterday, immediately opposite the site under discussion. And the reason given for these is that they are passive houses. Now, of course, passive houses are much more energy efficient, but do they have any less impact on the landscape than traditional houses? So you have to make a decision about Mill Lane. And I just remind members of the following points. Mill Lane has the benefits of being outside the Colwall Conservation Area. It is not near any listed buildings. It is not near any Victorian industrial heritage sites. The 16 affordable homes that it offers will not necessarily be available if you make up the numbers by a series of smaller developments. It has direct access to a road big enough to absorb the additional traffic. It is right next door to the new school, so there will be no extra school runs. It will have a footpath with access to and within walking distance of local facilities, and therefore promote better cycling and walking. It maintains the linear character of the village. It has the same visual impact as other sites. It has the significant majority support of the villagers, and there is a precedent for comprehensive consideration overriding landscape opinion alone. An objective, independent observer would undoubtedly conclude that when you take all factors into account, Mill Lane is clearly the right choice for Colwall, and I urge you to approve this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We move into the debate proper now, and the first speaker is Councillor Selden, followed by Councillor Roan.
Thank you, Chairman. My first point is a question for Mr. Bishop. Given that our policies, due to the lack of a 5-year land supply, are they therefore out of date? And does paragraph 11 of the NPPF therefore click in?
Mr. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, our policies are out of date, but you must also refer to the paragraph 172 of the NPPF, which relates to housing development or major development within an AONB, which directs you to refuse the application on that basis alone. 11D only kicks in if you do not agree with that statement.
Okay, I was looking at what other judgments on paragraph 11 and the one from February last year where the Secretary of State overruled the council in Doncaster, Edenthorpe, but that was a much larger, I think it's a 31 hectare site. So the issue here is, first of all, is this a major development in Colwall? Public opinion seems to think that it's the best site, and the second one, it's available. So I'm just struggling here greatly because I fear that we're damned if we do and damned if we don't with this application, because if we approve it, we'll probably get a judicial review. If we don't approve it, we'll probably get an appeal, which will then probably land on the Secretary of State's desk. So I will listen to the debate with interest, Mr. Chairman, and at the moment I am wavering greatly between one extreme to the other, and especially having heard Councillor Johnson's presentation, I'm not sure what to do with this one at the moment. I look forward to the debate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Selden. Councillor Rowan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Johnson really put forward an excellent argument there. I've been sat here doing some scribbling, and I've got a bit of a problem. If the whole village of Colwell is in an area of outstanding natural beauty, how would we then apply a different principle to another site? I mean, I realise that Mr. Bishop's going to go, look, you sort out each one on its individual application. I realise that. So if in my simple thinking, I'm going to put to one side that it's an area of outstanding natural beauty and just deal with this as a normal application and look at the merits of the site. Colwell is the smallest conurbation, the smallest area we've got that's served by a train, so a train station. And this site is a fraction over half a mile. It's not quite 3/4 of a mile walk from this site to the train station. Now, that train station has got direct connections with Birmingham, and it's got direct connections to London. Now, from a sustainability point of view, that to me shouts that the capacity of this village, small town even, has got a really, really good future. When we were stood there yesterday, we were noted behind us, and Councillor Johnson touched on it, that there were 3 houses being built, passive house standard. Absolutely wonderful to see that design and level of building code applied. But the density was really high, and in my mind, I'm trying to balance out what's the density of the proposed site. And I would imagine, looking at the pictures that we've got and the drawings that we've got, it's nowhere near as tight. So you add that together with the fact that this small town, this village, has got to grow. They've got to be built somewhere. Now, for me, social housing, regardless of whether it's affordable rent or whether it's for part rent, part buy, in whatever capacity, you're going to have social housing, affordable housing next door to a school. Now, you tend to find that those who take advantage of affordable housing are generally younger members of society, which means they're going to have children. So already we've got a development site, a proposed development site, which is next to a school, so there's going to be no school runs. And it's within walking distance of a train station. Now, I'm having a real battle here, and I can see exactly reading through this document. I would say this is one of the most difficult ones I've ever had put before me. And at the moment, I am edging towards going with against officer recommendation, but I'm really interested to see what the other members of the committee have got to say. But this is really, really hard. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Rowan. We move to Councillor Millmore, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like Councillor Selden and Councillor Rowan, I'm having difficulty with this one as well. Councillor Rowan made some very good points there, and the ward councillor was very persuasive. I would like to ask exactly at what stage of examination is the NDP at? It obviously has not gone to referendum, so it's not been made yet. So there is a possibility that it could fail at referendum. So exactly, has it finished its examination stage?
Mr. Brace, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's with the examiner, and the examiner's report is awaited. And we will obviously wait eagerly for that. So in theory, it could come this week. It could be another few weeks, but it's imminent. It's with the examiner, and we await it eagerly. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because we have gone against NDPs that have been at examination stage before. So yes, it carries weight, but it is not persuading me at this stage. But as I say, this is a very difficult one.
Right, is that it, Mr. Councillor Millmore?
Yes, thank you.
Right, Councillor Milne, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And because this application is so challenging, that we are charged to make a planning judgment that can be and has been very eloquently argued both ways. It gives us an opportunity, does it not, members, to require of applicants who, if they're serious in obtaining consent, to meet a higher bar, to meet an exception test on developing outside settlement boundaries, developing within A and Bs, which clearly do have impacts upon setting. We would expect, would we not, all the houses to be affordable. And I grant you that it is in many respects a sustainable location. And because it is, in theory, at least, in a sustainable location, those houses should be planned. And we have seen, I mean, I grant you that this is an outline application, but we have been appraised of a concept layout of that layout to be car free, essentially car free, or at least not car dependent. And I spoke about this in an earlier application today. And we also need to remind ourselves that this is agricultural land, a desirable land which is good and productive. I learn indeed that the farmer is in receipt of mid-tier payments from the RPA, so that confirms that it has a value in itself as agricultural land, and we sometimes need to remind ourselves that they aren't making any more of it. The density has also been touched upon, Councillor Rowan mentioned. If we're going to be developing outside settlement boundaries, we need to be making better use of the space. And reference has also been made to the excellent Whitfield developments on the other side, the passive house, the three quite densely spaced houses there, whether or not one appreciates the architecture of them, and that's another debate. And this is not for this application, because this is, after all, only an outline. We would expect applicants to produce schemes that meet that higher bar if we're going to make exceptions for them. And so I will be voting in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Is that a proposal, or are you just making?
Yes, there's a proposal to, if I may, Chair, to accept the officer's recommendation on the grounds that Mr. Brace gives in his report.
Okay, thank you.
To reviews. Thank you.
Have we a seconder for that proposal, please? Nobody prepared to come forward at this moment in time?
Sorry, I put my hand up.
Well, I can't see. So
Councillor Fagan seconded, Chairman.
Right, Councillor Fagan has seconded the refusal of this application. Okay, fine, thank you. We move on then to Councillor Wilding, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess other members of this committee will be aware that I occasionally nail a green flag to a post when I'm talking about applications. So I'm surprised to learn that I would vote for this application, but I still think we need to look the applicants in the eye and say, your application is just not good enough, right? The agent talks about sustainability. This isn't sustainable. The little drawings you've done, and I accept that this is outline application, but the drawings and everything you supply gives us an idea of how your minds work and how you might come forward with the application if it was agreed on. And the way you're suggesting it is just absolutely useless given the situation with climate emergency and all that. I want to see all the houses aligned so that they make the most of solar power and solar gain. I want to see electric car charge points. I want to see the whole arrangement different. You talk about sustainability, you're not proving your point at all. And also affordability, yeah, let's have 100% of the houses affordable. Let's make them all smaller, perfect for smaller families. So all in all, your presentation is useless. So I'll be voting against the officer's recommendation and saying I think it should go ahead. But if we do vote for it to go ahead, I want to see an absolutely fantastic development. Thanks.
Right, thank you, Councillor Wilding. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just becoming slightly worried with some of the statements that have been made by one or two members, because we're here to consider what is in front of us, not what we would like to see in an ideal world. And, you know, I think at least one, if not two statements that have been made would put us in an impossible position at a judicial review. Because if we refuse this now on a fairly close vote, because they've suggested it's because they're not doing what they want, then they would vote against it. And I think, you know, once we go down that road, we shall all be sort of, it's almost planning blackmail to a certain extent. Having said that, I congratulate Councillor Johnson on what was a presentation which changed my mind. I was unaware that the public in Cornwall have not been, their views have not been represented by their local council and by the neighbourhood development plan. It is quite clear that the public overwhelmingly support this site to the other site, which is now being included for some strange reason in their NDP, which has the same visual of, well, this is always subjective, but appears to have the same effect on the visual appearance from the Malvern Hills. I do think that we ought to take note of what the public think in this particular case and go for the better of the two options, because it is far more sustainable than the other one, bearing in mind it's near to the school, it has a better access. So I just don't understand. I've had a parish council that's got out of touch with its own residents and lost their NDP ballot at the end, and I suggest that's what would be likely to happen in this particular case. So I shall be supporting the approval of the application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Fagan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I have struggled enormously with this application as well. And I think Councillor Johnson put forward a very, very strong case. But however, the difficulty is that we need to be policy compliant here. I mean, this judicial review would overturn any, if we agreed to allow planning here, it would be overturned by judicial review. We're constantly being told that actually that is going to cost the council enormously. And I think that there's a due process here, and it could well be, I mean, I put a lot of faith in the neighbourhood development plans. I see them as a sort of core element of our local democracy. If something has gone wrong, terribly wrong with the process in Cornwall, then we need to let the due process take place. And if this NDP fails at referendum and the parish council need to restart all the discussions on the NDP, then that is part of the due process. In the meantime, perhaps conversations can happen about having exception sites, and perhaps people looking to develop the site can actually come up with a different plan which may not receive so many objections from consultees. But I just don't see that we're in a position at this point to make a decision about it. And I think we need to let that process happen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fagan. I've got no others registered to speak at the moment. Councillor Polly Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. As other members have said, this is a very, very difficult decision. but I understand that this particular site is outside the settlement boundary. That's correct, is it not? And I would just say that only at the last planning meeting, we turned down an application on the sole grounds that it was outside the settlement boundary. So do we need to be consistent on this?
I stand corrected, but I don't think the actual settlement boundary has been agreed yet until the neighbourhood plan is in place. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. Bishop?
It's in the draft plan. There is a settlement boundary in the draft plan, which is at regulation 60 in the present time, and it's outside of that. You're muted, Chairman.
Councillor Millmore, please.
Yes, just for consistency, I'd like to say that we have gone against an NDP at examination stage and approved a planning application outside of a settlement boundary in the past. So for consistency, I don't think that that's correct what Polly Andrews was saying.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fagan, second bite of the cherry.
Yeah, it's just that I completely agree with Councillor Andrews, and because I represented the parish that presented that last argument. I mean, we do need to have consistency, and we are relying enormously on our NDPs, and we have to actually sort of back them until something else comes up that suggests that we can't. There are too many objections on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to point out, we have passed, this committee has passed a great deal, numerous planning applications outside of, on the edge of the settlement boundary. We've done one in my ward. They've done numerous other ones throughout the county. And bearing in mind our position as far as the housing numbers, we're not in any position to defend that if it's adjoining a settlement boundary, albeit it's in dispute as to what it will be the settlement boundary anyway.
Okay, thank you. Have we any further speakers, please? I've got a note here from our senior solicitor that she'd like to address a comment that was made about judicial review. So if I could ask Mrs. Evans to comment now, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application you've got before you, obviously, as you've seen, you've had the officer's report, you've had the speakers. It is a balancing act. That's entirely up to you. Whichever way you want to, it's a subjective view, and you obviously have to weigh up in the balance for that. From my perspective, Councillor Fagan raised the issue of JR. The concern is that you will only get judicially reviewed if we have erred in law. If you have actually followed due process and actually looked at you've looked at the policies, you've looked at the material considerations, you've weighed those up in the balance, and you've taken everything into account, then a JR will not be successful. But it is entirely up to you as the decision maker to do that. As I say, if we've done something that erred in law, which we haven't taken into account, it's not about the weight process. That's entirely your decision. But as long as we've followed everything, we've taken into account everything, we've not dismissed what we shouldn't do, then no decision should be judicially reviewable. And I would not take that view when you're weighing up this application before you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Evans. Councillor Milne did have his hand up. You've taken it back down?
Well, I took it back down again because it was only a very minor point. And you'll forgive me because inevitably, but practically every intervention I refer to the historic environment, and just to say that there is a non-designated heritage asset on the northern boundary as defined by the Leat to Upper Mill. There was a series of mills from the medieval period here, I believe. The next one down being the Lug Mill. So there is a very, very slight historic environment interest on the north side. But whether it's to be added into the balance of this determination, I leave members to make their own decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mill. I've got no further speakers registered, so I'm going to move across to Mr. Bishop to make any comments before I invite the ward councillor to close the debate.
Thank you, Chairman. We're going to do a double act on this one. So Carl Brace is going to start and I will finish off.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully members agree that the report before you was balanced, and I think as many members have noted, this is quite a difficult one to wrestle with. And as Councillor Rowan said, if you set aside the AONB designation and work through the site as if that wasn't there, you would lead to a certain conclusion. However, it's absolutely fundamental that you do not set aside the AONB designation, because as you see from the conclusion that officers present to members, it is that AONB designation that leads to the recommendation. Your consideration of the impact on the AONB is the most important part of this decision-making process when we look at the local plan and particularly the MPPF. In terms of that, if you draw attention to paragraph 11D point I of the MPPF, where our housing plans are out of date, a development should be approved without delay unless, and this is where DI kicks in, the application of policies that protect areas or assets of particular importance and provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed. And the footnote to that part of the MPPF specifically states AONBs are one such designated asset. Of course, I talked you through paragraph 172 in relation to major developments, and footnote 6 of the MPPF also directs you to paragraph 176 regarding protecting the AONB. In terms of the application, it's just to caution members against balancing an alternative site which we didn't visit on site and have had no information apart from its broad location before you. In terms of an overall, the application here at Mill Lane is to be assessed on its merits, and your decision making should be made on how you weigh the benefits and disbenefits of this site. And effectively, to my mind, you should disregard the other site. We're talking about what you feel and what you think about Mill Lane when assessed against relevant policies. And I think that's everything I wanted to say. Yes, it is. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brace. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, very difficult decision for members to make on this one. Obviously, I can see that there is division across the room and on this particular proposal. As it stands at the present time, the resolution is to refuse the application, which has been seconded. So that will be come to your voting in a second. If that does not succeed, I would have to come back again, Chairman, to speak further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop, and understood. Right, I move back across to Councillor Johnson to sum up before we go to the vote then, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Difficult machinery. Can you confirm again that you can hear me?
We can indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was pleased that this ward was able to confirm to us that a judicial review is unlikely, provided we've followed procedure, and I believe we have. And as Councillor James said, this site is immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, and therefore you'd have difficulty refusing it if those were the only grounds. And bearing in mind, against the background of both Herefordshire and the parish council itself originally saying that Mill Lane is all right for development, for a house and for housing the school and everything else. And I was going to say, all other things being equal, support the villagers, but all other things not equal. I accept entirely the officer's comment that you must make a decision based on what is in front of you. Don't try to choose between it and something else. But the facts are that in the end, if you're to meet your target, we would have to build somewhere else if you refuse this one. And the others, some of them, the only site of a similar capacity is even worse. It has exactly the same visual impact, and the other one is inside the conservation area. Just to me, it is a no-brainer. All other things being equal, Chairman, and look at Mill Lane on its own merits. It deserves to be approved, and I urge you to support the villagers, the overwhelming view of the villagers. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Johnson. We now move to the vote. And I must remind members of the committee that you can only vote on this application before the committee if you've been present for the whole of the presentation and for the discussion on the application. Does anybody need to advise me that they're not permitted to vote? And I believe Councillor Stone is not able to vote. Councillor Wilding?
Yes, Chair, I've had internet problems, so I've cut out a couple of times for a few seconds each time. So I'd like your advice on that.
Right, well, I'll take advice from the legal officer.
When you say that you've actually cut out, I mean, did you hear the majority of the presentation of the case officer and also the speakers as well? Have you got the general gist? Have you actually heard what's been going on in the debate?
Yes, totally. When I say a couple of seconds, you know, just out for a few seconds on 3 occasions, but I've totally got the debate and understood everything.
That's fine. On that basis, Chair, I think Councillor Wilding is suitable and able to vote.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Chairman.
Councillor Stone, yes.
Thank you. Chairman, I'm not permitted to vote because unfortunately I dropped out, or my Wi-Fi dropped out at one stage. I'm thankful it didn't happen during my application, but I'm so sorry I missed some of the debate. But I did Councillor Johnson's presentation, but unfortunately I can't vote. But my apologies for the technology failing as I feared it would. Thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. So we've got one member, sorry, that cannot vote. Councillor Wilding will be able to vote. Now, we've got a proposal and a seconder, proposed by Councillor Milne, seconded by Councillor Fagan, for refusal of this application as recommended by the case officer, Mr. Brace. If I could ask for Jenny to confirm the numbers that are eligible to vote on this application and launch the vote, please.
Yes, Chair, I can confirm there's 11 eligible members to vote and they may vote now.
Okay, so the poll is on the screen now. You have 30 seconds to vote.
It's up on my screen, Chairman, but I don't vote, do I?
You don't touch anything.
Thank you.
It won't let you, don't worry. Okay, Chairman, all 11 votes are in. And I can confirm we have 5 votes for, 5 votes against, and 1 abstention.
Thank you. That's a good one, isn't it?
Chairman's casting vote.
Chairman's
Good luck,
casting
John.
vote. Well, I voted for refusal as per the officer recommendation. So I've got to confirm that. So my casting vote is in favour of refusal for this application. So unfortunately, this application is refused. That concludes the business of the meeting today. Our next meeting is next week, so quite a quick turnaround. We've got a busy month this month. So thank you all very much for your attendance today and your input. We've had very good debate, not easy subjects today, but 3 quite substantial applications to consider, and I thank members for that.
John, can you confirm the live stream is turned off?
I was just about to, Vice Chairman. So before I